The sky was shining blue, and then an indignant voice rang out, who asked if he had really failed. It was the voice of a young man in a black suit and with black hair. The guy slammed on the table and indignantly asked why he failed. He also passed the interview. The man opposite grinned at him and said that it didn't mean anything, because someone had already been appointed. And then the man did not sincerely say that he was sorry. On the way home, of course, the workers began to sneer at him. They said that this boy was so stupid that he thought they would choose him. Of course, all this infuriated the guy, leaving with an angry face. He said that it was outrageous because they could have said it before. Looking at the huge building where it was written that it was a corporation, the guy, enraged, said that they were dishonest people and they would definitely go bankrupt soon. Suddenly, at this time, someone pushed him and the guy fell in a rage, looked at the one who did it and automatically threw that he was blind. Looking down at the guy, some blonde dandy asked what he was. Next to the blonde man in the purple suit was a girl with golden hair. The guy saw the girl and asked with concern what Lily was doing here. The guy asked Lily if this was her boyfriend, and she said with panic that there was no more. Who will love a poor and insignificant person? After these words, the girl clung to the chest of the blonde and smiled and said that this guy is not like a blonde. The guy is so attractive and well off. The blonde hugged her, said that this was his insatiable girl. He would take good care of her. The girl, embarrassed, told him to stop teasing her. The guy who started wearing a green hat looked at all this with a pale face and wondered if he had been used. The blonde man grinned at the guy and said that he forgot to tell the guy that he took his job. The girl also looked at the guy with a grin, but the guy was angry. The blonde man, making a face, said that he took away from the guy not only his job but also his girlfriend. But what can he do to him? Really dare to hit him? Enraged, the guy shouted that he would dare and sent his fist straight into the blonde man's face and he was thrown to the ground. After that, the guy in a rage got up on the blonde and began to beat him with all his might, saying that the same one had asked for it. The blonde man shouted that Ning Tao had gone crazy or something. The blonde man looked at his already girlfriend in despair and asked her to bring security. The girl running towards the building shouted to Ning Tao that let him wait and see, she would now call the guards to teach him a lesson. Spitting saliva in the direction of the blonde, the guy shouted that he was just a boy with a trust fund. Ning Tao is not afraid of anyone. Sooner or later he will become rich, whatever it cost him. At this time, suddenly a mechanical voice was heard in the guy's head, asking him that he was really ready to give everything to become rich. Looking at the megaphone, which only he saw, the guy anxiously asked about who it was. Megaphone immediately said that it didn't matter who he was. He just needs to know if the guy is really willing to give everything to become rich. The guy, looking suspiciously at the megaphone, shouted that he was not talking nonsense. Then he shouted that he was ready for anything. After some noise, a window appeared in front of the guy. It looks like a system notification in games. The window said that Mr. Tang Shan, the second most influential shareholder of Kaianai Corporation, had announced his desire to transfer 5% of his shares to a person whose name is Ning Tao. After this statement, Mr. Tang passed away. Of course, it shocked the guy. At this time, Lai Lai had already returned with the guards and pointed at Ning Tao and shouted that it was the one who hit him. The guards immediately flew into a rage and shouted about how this reckless brat dared to hit him. 3 of the guards surrounded the guy and one of them, who was standing in front, asked him if he should break the guy's legs or arms for what he had done. Another offered to undress him. The guy, sweating from fright, immediately said in a trembling voice in panic that they should stop, because he is the second most influential shareholder of the Kaianai Corporation. The blonde man, hearing this, burst out laughing loudly, saying that if the guy is a shareholder, then he is the CEO. The girl also supported the new guy, saying that it was very hilarious. The guards also did not stand aside, and one of them said that he was the director, and the second that he was the chairman. A blonde man with red eyes pointed at the guy and shouted to teach him a lesson. The guy in fright thought that he knew that all this was complete nonsense. There is no free cheese. Raising his fist, the guard smiled maliciously and said that this brat should be a good boy in the next life. Suddenly, a loud voice was heard telling the guards to stand, and when the guard turned around, his eyes rolled out of their sockets from shock. His thin hand was grabbed by the huge hand of some big guy in black glasses. The guy in a panic thought about what was going on here at all, and then the big guy began to scatter the guards left and right. When the captain was sent flying, the others immediately ran away after him. Standing in a daze, the guy asked about who this superhero was. It was so impressive. Suddenly there were 3 big men and they were all the same face and body. Everyone bowed and greeted Mr. Ning. The guy even recoiled. Another voice rang out from the other side, and a man with a mustache greeted Mr. Ning. Then this man introduced himself as his lawyer Gao Lai. The mustachioed, bespectacled man smiled kindly and said that Mr. Tang had asked him to transfer all his shares to the guy. After the lawyer showed the guy the agreement on the transfer of shares, the guy with bags under his eyes was just shocked and thought he should behave calmly. Hearing this, the blonde and Lily with red eyes looked at the guy and screamed that what he was saying was true. The guards were just in a stupor. The guy took the papers and, pretending as if everything was as it should be, began to sign the papers, asking how much he would get by signing it. Mentally, he constantly repeated to himself that he should behave calmly. The bespectacled man raised his finger and said that it was at least 100 million. The guy calmly nodded and handed the papers back and said he was done, so let them take them back. Inside Ning Tao's mind, firecrackers were popping and music was playing. He rejoiced heartily, shouting that it was true. That's just fine. The guy smiled the kindest smile, although there was a shadow of a demon behind him, looked at everyone and asked about who was the handsome guy who wanted to teach him a lesson. The guards immediately trembled with fright, pointed to the stunned blonde who, with snot and a stream of sweat, did not know what to say. Pointing at him, the guy said to strip the blonde and hang him on a tree. The guards immediately started smiling and getting down to business. The recoiling blonde man asked what these villains were doing. One of the guards, rubbing his hands with a villainous smile, asked what they were doing and let the guy guess. The captain of the guards shouted to beat the shit out of this dandy and they all clung to the poor guy. And after a while, Lai Tian was knocked out. The guy who witnessed all this felt just fine. At this time, the doors of the building opened and an angry voice rang out, telling the guy that he was telling Ning Tao to get out of here. Why he was still here. A man in a black tuxedo, getting out of the corporation in a rage, shouted that Ning Tao was useless garbage. He would never give him a job. Everyone turned in his direction at once and the man in the tuxedo froze, surrounded by big men and guards. He didn't understand what was going on here, and he was scared to hell. The secretary with the mustache frowned and told the employee that this was a friendly reminder, but the person in front of them was their second most influential shareholder. Therefore, he must watch his language. The guy was picking his nose at the same time. The man in the suit even had a wig flying up from fright, and he looked at Ning Tao and asked that he was the second most influential shareholder. The guy smiled and asked the bespectacled man that he thinks he has the right to dismiss employees, right? The bespectacled man nodded and said that of course he had this right. For example, he could dismiss this employee. The guy with the indifferent face said that he decided that this guy was fired. The worker in the suit immediately fell to his knees and grabbed the guy's leg, crying and begging him not to do it. He shouted to be spared, but the guy was indifferent. The guy pointed at one of the bouncers and snapped his finger, told him to throw this guy out. The big guy nodded, immediately sent the employee flying straight in the direction of one of the guards, who was also thrown out before that. While the guy was surrounded by big guys and beaming, Lai noticed him. Immediately approaching him, she grabbed him by the hand and with tears in her eyes, said that she had just been possessed. And then, looking at the guy with puppy eyes, she said that Lai Tian was so unreliable. He's not even half as good as Ning Tao. And then the girl asked if they could be together again. The guy looked away deliberately indifferently. The girl immediately blushed and began to stick her face to the guy's hand and said that she had always loved him. The guy kicked that apologized and said that to her regret he did not like women of easy virtue. Seeing this, the blonde with the bumps got up from his seat and shouted at Ning Tao, telling him not to think that he could do whatever he wanted with money. With a nasty and villainous smile, the guy apologized and said that, but isn't it so, if a person has money, then he can really do whatever he wants. The blonde could only cry from it. After that, the guy turned to the bespectacled man and asked if he had brought the money. The bespectacled man turned to one of the big guys and asked him to give him a suitcase. When he opened the suitcase, of course there was a lot of money inside. The bespectacled man said that he assumed that the guy might need money for small expenses, so he only took $1 million. The guy grabbed 1 wad of money and threw it at the guards and other people. Then pointing at the blonde, he told the people to punch him. When they do, they can get $100. While the blonde was sitting thinking that he would have to feel the beating again, everyone was looking at him like he was a tasty morsel. While everyone was a poor blonde, the guy was throwing money left and right, surrounded by big men in glasses. Walking down the street with a whole company of big men behind his back, the guy saying that today he was the most luxurious man on this street. Suddenly, at this time, a voice rang in his head and a new notification popped up in front of the guy, saying that the initial task was completed and the spending system was officially activated. Suddenly, after some hallucinations, the guy got into a strange place and a window with his characteristics appeared in front of him. On the left was his photo, and on the right was the level. The level was 1, strength, which was 10, dexterity and retaliatory actions, which were also equal to 10. In the last row there was a defense with 8 points. The guy smiled looking at the characteristics window, said that this system is too good. At this time, a new notification popped up, telling the guy to give the system a name. The guy smiled and said that from that day on, the name of the system would be Xiaoba. After a while, the system confirmed the name and immediately displayed a new notification with a new task. He has to spend 100 million in 48 hours. The reward for the mission was 250 points and a +1 characteristic. Castration was used as punishment for the failed mission. After reading the punishment for failure, the guy turned pale and grabbed at one place, thinking that Li Xiaoba really needed to be so cruel and bloody. The system immediately told the guy to complete the task, and a sensor with a countdown appeared in front of the guy. The guy realized that then he would behave like a real spender. Looking at the bespectacled lawyer, the guy wondered what had puzzled him. Then the guy pointed at him and said he was a good guy. Did he want to work for him, which puzzled him. The bespectacled man informed the guy that he already has a well-paid job in the company. Stopping the bespectacled man's words, the guy told him to give his bank account and take out his smartphone. The bespectacled man, turning pale, said that the guy misunderstood him and he wanted to continue, but the guy stopped him, telling him not to say a word more. The guy immediately started typing, and after a while a notification came to the bespectacled man's phone. When the lawyer took out his smartphone and saw the notification, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The guy arrogantly raised his head and said that he had transferred 1 million to the bespectacled man's account. Did he still doubt him? The bespectacled man, seeing the amount, gasped. The bespectacled man immediately flamed up and asked what orders the boss would have. For him, he is ready to climb a mountain of blades or fry in oil. Everything except unnatural bribery. The guy pointed at him, told him to go first and sign an agreement on the transfer of shares, and the lawyer immediately nodded and disappeared in a moment, running for work. So much so that the wind picked up, which lifted the skirts of the ladies along the way. Seeing them, the old man shouted that they should get out of his way and not block him. Seeing this, the guy thought that this lawyer is really full of energy. After a while, the guy was already standing in front of the building with the BMW logo. Smiling, the guy looked at this building and said that the next thing on his list would be buying a car. Of course, there were many beautiful cars in the salon, and when he first entered the salon, he was immediately surrounded by uniformed workers from all sides. One of them said that she was the best saleswoman in this store. The guy, sweating from such attention, thought that all these workers are too friendly, and then he wanted to choose how the workers immediately began to evaluate his clothes. They realized that he had a cheap shirt, cheap pants, and even cheap shoes. Seeing this, they immediately frowned and turned to leave. One said that this was another poor dude. She allowed her colleagues to do it. The second clicked her tongue, said that she did not want to do it, and looking at his clothes, he would not even be able to afford a garbage car. The guy was stunned by the reaction of these workers. He felt a surge of rage and, clenching his fists, barely restrained himself, thinking. He said that they would definitely regret it. At this time, another girl approached the guy and asked him if there was a car he would like to see. She was a brunette with pink eyes and in the same uniform as the other workers. The guy seriously told her to show him the most expensive car. The girl smiled and told him to come here, and other workers were whispering behind her. One, laughing, said that she couldn't wait for him to face the dirt. The second grinned and said that he was playing the role of the rich so well, and the third just grinned. After a while, they arrived at a beautiful white car with an excellent badge in front. The guy said that this car is very good and even very beautiful. While the guy was inspecting this car from all sides, he added that it was perfect for his style. The girl, seeing this with a smile, said that the price of the Rolls-Royce Phantom 6.2 million. The guy curiously asked if it was possible to sit in it, but then a booming voice rang out, telling him to stand, otherwise he would not be able to pay for it. Even the girl worker recoiled and looked with concern at the woman who asked Mr. not to touch the car at will. Next to this madam was a fat man with an impudent smile and a gold watch and chain around his neck. He was hugged by a beautiful blonde with blue eyes. The guy turned to the woman's voice, and it was clear from the look that these words offended him. He thought that this woman was looking down on him. Immediately, the woman shouted at the employee, who seemed to be called Sue Ran, and said that she should not bring such a client. The girl said with concern that it was not right. At this time, the girl of that guy grinned and told her boyfriend where this poor guy came from. He's too blind to see that he can't even afford the steering wheel of this car. The guy told Ning Tao that the toy store opposite was more suitable for him, and then he laughed out loud and suddenly pushed him away, saying that he should go from here. The hero got even more angry at the whole situation, and the manager immediately started showing these two buyers the car, said that it was the latest Rolls-Royce model. The blonde's eyes turned the color of gold, and with dollars instead of pupils, the girl said that this car is just amazing. She immediately grabbed the expensive hand, said that she liked this car, and then asked him to buy a car for her. The guy looked at the charms of the girl and blushing raised his card and asked how much this car costs, because he bought it. Here the manager is already ready, said that it costs 6.2 million, and an awkward silence hung in the sky for a second. After a second of being stunned, the guy screamed, mentally shouted that 6.2 million was too expensive and even dropped the card. But the guy tried to come to his senses. He looked at the girl who was looking at him with a dreamy look and frowned, thinking that 6.2 million in just 2 nights. Yes, she is a real dreamer. The manager immediately told the guy to give her his card, and the girl insisted that this is what she wants. The guy turned pale and pointed to another car, said that he thought that that car was also great, it was more suitable for her. Upon hearing this, the blonde, enraged, screamed about who the guy took her for, and the manager, enraged, shouted that he said he would buy a car. The guy in a rage shouted at his girlfriend that they didn't look at the gift horse in the teeth, but at that second the hero pushed everyone away and told them to step aside. Taking out and holding out my gold card from my pocket, I said that he would buy this car. Such a gold card was produced by the system, especially for the users of the system. All three were shocked. They couldn't help but utter a word. They didn't think he was a millionaire. He looked like an ordinary student in cheap clothes. But the employee who brought the guy was pleased and said that the total amount was 6.2 million, and then added that it was an honor for her to serve this young man. The guy smiled, put his hand on the girl's shoulder and told her to round up the amount to 7 million. The girl, dumbfounded, asked why it was. The guy smiled and added that he would leave the remaining 800,000 to this girl for tips and a card without a password, so she could safely add them to her tea. The girl, delighted, thought that she was really asleep. The manager at this time, folding her hands, said that she was ready to bet with anyone that the guy had only 700 yuan on the card and no more. While the payment was being made, the man added that young people in their time had become so arrogant and did not respect adults by how much. And then everyone heard that the payment was successful and gaped in shock and petrified. The guy thought a little about himself, making a decision. He said to give him one car from each brand that he would say Mercedes, Benz, BMW, Porsche, Audi, from all these brands, and that they are all the most expensive. The girl immediately nodded with a smile, and after a while the guy was walking around the salon and choosing car after car. He most importantly had to spend more money. Then the guy smiled and said the girl that she was good. He really appreciates her work ethic, so if she chooses a car, then he will pay for it. This was the last straw for the trio, and they all spat blood, thinking that this is crazy. He looks like a crazy rich Asian, just like in the movies. The girl was embarrassed, said that it was inappropriate, and even dropped the card. The guy smiled and said that luck is for kind-hearted people. She is definitely worthy, because she was the only one who helped him in this car dealership, and the others just left. At this time, the fat man, dissatisfied, grabbed his sweetheart by the waist and told her to leave, but she looked thoughtfully at the guy. And then, enraged, she turned with evil words and intentions. She hit her boyfriend, telling him not to pretend to be cool when in fact he is poor. The guy screamed in despair when he felt that something had crunched there. A blonde with a sparkle in her eyes approached the guy and puffed out her chest and asked if he would give her a ride, because he might need her tonight. The guy turned pale from the action of this blonde, turned and kicked her, telling her to get lost. At this time, the manager, who did not let the hero see the car and disgraced in front of everyone, turned pale and thought that she needed to save her life. But when she wanted to sneak away quietly, the guy stopped him by hanging over her like a giant and asked about where she was going. His specialty is to hold a grudge for a very long time. The manager asked in fright what he was going to do. The guy looked at the employee who was kind to him, asked her to bring the store manager here, and she nodded. After a while, a middle-aged man stood in front of the guy and with an ingratiating smile asked the guy what he could do for him. The guy ordered to catch this woman. The woman screamed that she had connections. Did the guy think that he could easily fire her? And the manager was in a stupor and told Mr. Nin that this was not very good. The guy scratched his head and asked if the manager wanted him to buy the whole store and then fire him, or if he was firing her right away. The decision was of course up to the manager himself. All the workers were shocked. After all, to buy a whole store you need a lot of money. He can't just squander money, he's too spoiled. Looking at these ladies, the guy mentally said that yes, what do they know about him? He's being forced to squander money. The manager did not know what to do because this is the first time in his life. Clients have never put him in such conditions. At that moment, one of the female employees said in his ear that this guy was the second most influential shareholder of Kyanai Corporation. Upon hearing this, the manager immediately became enraged, clenched his fist and told him to be sure he would fire this lady right now. The guy smiled and said that this was right. The manager immediately pointed to the exit, told her to leave right away, and she screamed, asking who he was in general to fire her. Yes, she. But the man, without thinking for a long time, without listening to her, kicked her in the ass and said that she was nobody here and let her go from here and never come back. The woman went to the rifle directly to the blonde, who was refused by the hero, and then the manager, shaking off his hands, came closer to them and spat in their direction, saying that this was just empty chatter, and they were taking up his time. After that, the man looked at the guy who was scratching his ear, and with a twinkle in his eyes, and asked him if Mr. Ning Tao had any orders. The guy is not interested, looked at the old man bowing to him and just kept silent without saying a word. Then he looked at his gold card with sadness. He still had 70 million, and he wondered how he could spend them all at all. The guy got into the car, said that first he would take the most expensive one, and leave the rest of the cars here. The manager and the employee bowed low to him and wished him a good road. Driving along the road, the guy was racking his head and thinking that he still needed to spend 70 million. It annoyed him so much. He was thinking all the way by car that he would definitely fry well if he could not spend the right amount. People around seeing his car delivered phones and took pictures with thoughts that this is an incredibly expensive car. Suddenly the guy came up with the idea to call his bros for help. After saying hello, he told the friend to go to the Songyan Hotel together. He called them to have a good time. A friend heard him and asked him if the guy was crazy, because this is the most expensive hotel in the city. When he drove past a strange girl on the street, he scared her because the guy, responding to his friend, became enraged and shouted that his friend was crazy himself. So after a while, the guy was already next to a luxurious building and looked at all this splendor with a sparkle in his eyes. Looking at all this, the guy said with admiration that this is what the Sunyun Hotel is like. Everything was so stylish here. Looking around, the guy thought that they had not arrived yet, and then he heard a familiar voice saying that he had already apologized. What were they doing at all? In the distance, 3 people were standing and arguing. On one side there are 2 boys, and on the other a guy in a stylish black tuxedo, and with an arrogant look. One of the guys shouted that he only accidentally stepped on shoes, and he already demands 10,000 from him. The major grinned, pointed to his shoes, and said that it was a high-class design. 100,000 for a shoe. He had already shown his mercy and asked for only 10,000 grand and then pushed the guy. The rich man told him to shut his mouth and drag the money, but at that moment the guy was caught by Ning Tao, to which the guy was very surprised by the appearance of a friend. The guy, in turn, asked his friend if he was okay and what the problem was. The guy wanted to tell him a story to tell, but the hero guessed it himself and slapped his friend on the shoulder, said that everything was fine. He would sort everything out now. With a frown, he walked towards the major and threw a wad of banknotes at his leg. And then looking at the one, he said that only 10,000 pieces, then let him take it and leave. The blue-haired man asked his friend if he was crazy, because this guy was clearly just blackmailing them. The guy grinned and said that he needed to spend a lot of money somewhere, and this guy could help him. The major frowned, turned around and shouted at the employee that their hotel was getting worse and worse. How could they let someone like that come in here? The employee jumped up from shock at first, but then came to his senses and smiled and asked for forgiveness and said that he would take them out of here right away, and this would not happen again. The guy frowned at the arrogant guy and thought that he had not yet taken revenge for the fact that this major pushed his friend and threw the employee away, told him to fuck off. Enraged after this thought, the hero pushed away the employee who wanted to kick him out and told him to fuck off. He hadn't figured out that guy yet. The hero, throwing bundles of money, shouted that one step is only 10,000, then his friend can step on him even more, because he pays 200,000. His friend, already lit up with joy and immediately nodded to his friend, approached the pale major and warned him that it would not be sweet for him right now. He started trampling on his feet with all his might and didn't even plan to stop, which he has. The man screamed in pain at the top of his voice. After a while, nothing was left of his expensive shoes. It was even visible toes on the foot. Clutching his reddened legs, he already began to cry, shouting that his leg was over. The guy threw another wad of money, and said that it was for his treatment. Turning around, the guy smiled and said that the major would remember that he would never blackmail others in his life again. Otherwise they would always do this to him. Turning around, he told his friends that they were leaving. The major, enraged, shouted for the guy to stand where he was, and then asked him if this guy knew who he was. Ning Tao scratched his nostril and indifferently said that the man was probably a shoe seller, since he arranged such a show here in the middle of the day. The major pointed at himself and shouted in rage that he was the owner of Ma jewelry stores. They're just trash compared to him. He can strangle them with his money. Immediately there were whispers of onlookers. Someone recognized this family and said it was Ma Feng. His family owns half of the jewelry stores in the city. Someone else said that they have a toilet made of pure gold. Of course, the guy listening to all this was pleased. Smiling, Ning Tao thought that now they were going to see which of them was more wasteful. He wants to pretend to be a rich boy, but he's just a frog jumping on a frying pan. The guy clicked his finger and pointed to one employee who had been nearby all this time. Smiling, he handed Tom a gold card and said that the altercation that had just been here was not pleasant, so he should bring him 3 bottles of Chateau Lafite, Rothschild 1982 to rinse his throat. After a while, beautiful, smiling girls in Chinese kipao came with wine in their hands and said that it was his wine that he ordered. Grinning, the major picked up his platinum card and told them to bring him supplies of good Mao Tai. After a while, the guy was already sitting on a chair and put his feet in a wooden basin, into which Mao Tai was poured. The waiter, looking at the satisfied look of the major, thought that he was definitely an idiot. After looking at the guy, the major said after all the procedures that these poor people would not understand the charm of such excess. The guy looked at the waiter and said that he wanted all the Kobe beef and black caviar that they had. He needed to feed the dog. Upon hearing this, the major spat blood from shock, and the waiter simply said that he understood. Enraged, the major immediately pointed to a strange thing and asked how much it cost. The waiter calculated everything on a calculator, said that it was a rare red coral. Its cost is 300,000. Taking the coral and slamming it to the ground with what he broke, he shouted that he would give 400,000 for it. From this action, the waiter's eyes popped out of their sockets and the calculator fell from his hands. The guy looked indifferently at the other side, at the blue thing, and asked how much it cost, to which the waiter said that this rare jade would be found in the Netian. Its cost is 500,000. The guy smiled and said that he was giving 600,000 for it and pushed him, which caused the jade to break. With rage in his eyes, the major shouted that they would now see who would stand up to what the guy with the same flame in his eyes said that he was waiting for this too. And that's how they started smashing everything that wouldn't fall into their hands, starting with an antique chair for 700,000 and a statue for 1 million, ending with expensive things for 2 million and 3 million. Watching this scene, Ning Tao's friends asked each other that Ning Tao had really gone crazy. He had never been like this before and did not behave like this. After a while, someone suddenly heard a hoarse groan and 2 rich men fighting with each other turned around and saw an old man lying on the ground, who said that he had just fallen. Can someone help him? He is a professional liar. He added that if they do not dare to help him, he will tell the police that they pushed him and ask for damages. The major immediately raised his hand and shouted to the whole hall that he would help him and how he went to raise this old man. Even the old man himself was stunned by the fact that the guy was very pleased with his actions. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. They said that this guy was probably really very rich, since he was ready to help a liar who was openly cheating in front of everyone. Then the major pointed to Ning Tao and said that he helps about 10 people like him every day. How can this poor man compare to him? The guy, hearing all these words in his direction, smiled villainously and said that really this major is so naive. The guy took out his smartphone, from which the major recoiled and did not understand why he took out the phone. The guy continued, saying that just for one of his calls, he would make the major's company bankrupt in 1 second, and then he definitely won this race. At this time, the guy's smartphone started ringing with a strange melody, and the guy picked it up and casually answered, asking who was bothering him. Immediately, a desperate cry was heard from the receiver, telling the boss that the stock price of their company had plummeted. The guy was surprised and told the employee not to joke like that, but he shouted that he was not joking. Stock prices are being manipulated by someone. Had he offended some big shot? The major with bulging eyes shouted for the employee to close his mouth. He didn't believe that anyone would go against his company at all. The secretary immediately told the boss to apologize quickly if he really offended someone. The guy froze and then realization came to him and he looked at the devilishly smiling guy in front of him with bulging eyes. Is this really all his doing? Immediately behind the waiter, pointing his finger at the man, shouted that it was him, and there were a lot of red evil eyes behind him. Other waiters immediately ran to the major and shouted that his credit card was blocked. The things that I just broke are worth more than 10 million. Even the old man clung to him, saying that this beggar even wanted to escape after meeting him. The major, running away, shouted that he would return to the company and get the money, but then he was stopped by a furious employee of the institution. He looked at this major with red eyes and swollen veins, and shouted that it was actually a bad idea to try to escape after he broke all their things. Everyone surrounded the poor major, who, with a trembling voice, asked what they wanted to do to him. One of the employees asked the guy that he didn't pay, seeing his look. The employee ordered Bruce to beat out all the bad things from this client. 3 other employees immediately attacked the major. One of the employees even took a chair. And after a while, the major was lying on the ground with bumps on his head, black eyes in his face, and a crumpled face. Approaching him, the guy looked down at the major and asked him how he felt. Does he still want to compete with him? Clenching his teeth, the major immediately got up and grabbed the guy's leg, crying with whole streams of tears, shouted that he was wrong. That the richest, he is not even a rival to him. And then he began to ask the guy to spare him. Smiling, the guy said that he would spare him because he asked his brothers to pay him 10,000 pieces, and he asked him to give him 10 million. The man looked up with tears in his eyes and said that his card was blocked. The guy turned serious and said that then he should write out a check, and he got up panicking and began to look for a check in his pockets faster. And after a couple of minutes, he handed him the check. Smiling, the guy said that 10 million had been received. The major approached a little more and with an ingratiating smile asked the hero about his company, whether he could bring everything back as it was. A guy with a disgruntled face pretended to be calling someone and asked if he could stop manipulating the stock price. The system immediately replied that it would do it without any problems. And then a second later, strange music started playing again in the smartphone of a major. The major immediately excitedly asked what was wrong with the shares, and then he was pleased that the company's shares had returned to normal. The guy excitedly asked what exactly it was, and the employee confirmed it. After that, the major bowed to Ning Tao, saying thank you to him, and he indifferently waved him off, told him to get out of here. The major really began to roll with the words that he was already leaving here. The guy looking at him grinned and told a friend to look at this garbage. A friend in a t-shirt with a twinkle in his eyes said that Ning Tao is his hero for his whole life. And then the one who threw at him said that he loved him and his life. The guy pushing the guy away told him to back off, because it's disgusting. The guy looked at his other friend with surprise and asked why he had been silent all this time. He gritted his teeth and took out a bouquet of red roses from somewhere and shouted that he had decided everything. He's going to be gay for a guy. The guy froze in shock from these words, and then, putting his arm around his friend's shoulders, he told them that they should never even dare to think about it again. While they were coming in, the girl saw them off with bows and smiles. And after a while, music started playing in the institution, and friends began to celebrate by drinking wine and eating whatever they wanted. After that, they even started dancing with beautiful girls who were also in that institution. At the end, the guy took a shower, exhaled and completely rested, said that it was fine. Falling on the bed, he said that he had spent about 20 million today, and 50 is still left to spend. What a pleasant and relaxing task he has. It's all a small matter. While he was resting with his eyes closed, a new notification popped up in front of the guy. Or rather, a face appeared in front of him asking him if he was really so naive. The guy almost died of fright. Jumping back, he shouted that it was a ghost. Then a ghost appeared. The glowing ball said that he was not a ghost of Xiao Ba. The guy yelled at him why he was pretending to be a ghost late at night. He scared the guy half to death. Xiao Ba started looking for something and at the same time said that he was not so bored to pretend to be a ghost. He's here to notify him of something. The guy owes the system 40 points. The percentage is 1 point per day. He should pay Xiao Ba as soon as possible. Frowning, the guy asked since when he should. Xiao Ba immediately started saying that 10 points were needed for the gold card, 15 points for stock manipulation and another 15 points for cancelled stock manipulation. These words fell like a stone on the guy's head. The guy jumped up from his seat and waving his arms, became enraged and shouted that nothing was clear. Then suddenly he stopped and then asked Xiao Ba, since it came to glasses, what use they were. Xiao Ba, looking at the guy with disdain, asked him that he didn't even know that. From this attitude, the guy became enraged and shouted that when did he tell him about it. Xiao Ba said that with the system's points, he could even become a Super Saiyan. The surprised guy shouted that it was cool. And then, he asked about what other ways he could get points, except how to complete tasks. Xiao Ba indifferently said that if a guy spends 100,000 grand, he only gets 1 point. With a twinkle in his eyes, the guy asked what it meant. Today he earned a lot of points. But Xiao Ba doused the guy with a bucket of cold water and said that he needed to spend the money he had earned himself. The guy was stunned and asked what it meant. After spending a lot of money, he did not earn a single point, to which Xiao Ba replied that he did. And then turning around, he said that in any case, the guy should pay as soon as possible. The guy turned pale from these words. Then the guy stopped the glowing ball and with a cold sweat, asked what would happen if he couldn't pay back what he owed. Xiao Ba turned around and grinned and said that it was a secret and he wouldn't tell him. Then a second later he disappeared, leaving the guy alone on the bed. The next day, people turned around and asked with shock where this rich guy came from. Someone said he had too many guards. The girls also asked that he might be some kind of idol. They all looked at Ning Tao, who had bags under his eyes, and behind him 2-meter giants followed him. The guy, remembering last night, mentally said that it was the scoundrel Xiao Ba who made him stay up all night. Remembering the smile of the system, the guy shuddered, because he didn't even know the deadline for paying for points. If he doesn't pay on time, there will be consequences. The guy looked at the 3 guards and told them to take the cars he bought. And then, looking at the ladder and pointing his finger at him, he told Tom to follow him to the advertising agency. He bowed and followed Nai. The guy was thinking that he should complete all the tasks as soon as possible in order to pay on time. This time he will make a big scene. Gritting his teeth, he walked towards the car, the door of which was opened by one of the thugs. A huge number of people gathered near Jiangnan University, who were looking at a row of cars. Looking at these machines, the students oohed and awed. Someone said that there are so many beautiful cars here. Someone else wondered if this rich guy really came to their university. 2 bouncers got out of the cars, took the red carpet, and immediately opened it in front of the car. Then one of the big guys opened the door of a white car and a smiling Ning Tao in a brand new suit with a red tie came out. The guards immediately stood in a row and bowed and greeted Mr. Ning. Immediately, the students recognized Ning Tao. Someone with hearts in their eyes shouted that he was a rich guy. Someone else shouted that she loved the guy. The guy ran to him asking him to let them be his assistants, and the girls looked at him in love and clung to his legs. There were voices everywhere telling him to be their friends. The guy, smiling, waved to everyone greeting his classmates, and at that moment 2 bouncers put a golden table in the middle of the red carpet and asked the guy to sit down. He impressively sat down on him like a king and looked down at everyone. 2 girls clung to his leg, and the guy coughed dryly, then made it clear to the guards that they removed the girls. Those crying shouted that they should not be taken away from their master, because he is so good. The guy took out a microphone and greeted everyone. Smiling, he said that today he came here to announce something. The onlookers started whispering again. Someone asked what happened. Someone else wondered if the guy had bought a university, and someone else suggested that the guy had donated money. The guy looked at the big guy next to him and said that he could start. He nodded to him in response. He took out a walkie-talkie and shouted to all units that they were starting. From the words of this guard, everyone turned pale with fear, and when strange sounds were heard, everyone panicked in search of sounds. Someone pointed to the side, shouting to everyone to look there, and immediately everyone who was standing nearby turned around. They saw 2 helicopters carrying 2 posters with gold inscriptions saying that the guy needs a maid, to whom he will pay generously. The guy sat smiling on his throne, and people wondered why he would be paying handsomely. Is he some kind of maniac? He squandered so much just to find himself a maid. Whoever is hired will definitely enter high society. While everyone was talking, the guy was lighting a cigarette with the help of burning money. Exhaling smoke, the guy threw the burning banknotes up. He shouted that people didn't think it was an easy job. Smiling, he pointed ahead and said that he only needed 1 maid. She needs to be in touch 24/7 and he only wants the most beautiful girl. The girls heard it and immediately started talking. One said that she thought he just wanted to find a mistress. The second chuckled, saying that he was an upstart. The third said that she was not so accessible. The girl realized that no one was paying attention to them. They thought that they could no longer continue to pretend to be innocent girls. Immediately, the first one smiled and puffed out her chest, said that her breasts were 4 sizes, so he should choose her. The second one bulged her ass, said that she had a cool ass, so he should choose her. The green-haired girl licked her lips and said that she knows how to massage well, so she asked to choose her. The guy indifferently told them not to worry, because he would interrogate them all one by one. And while he was talking, the girls vied with each other to stretch out their hands to him. The guy told the first candidate to come forward, and a girl in pink shoes, a crimson skirt, and a t-shirt of the same color came to the podium. The guy looked at her with hearts instead of eyes. One of the guys said that this beauty is almost like a goddess, Someone else said that the guy did not choose her, she is known for her easy behavior. The girl straightened her hair, told the guy that she wanted to work for him, and then blew a kiss. But this did not impress the guy and he raised the X wand and sent her an air kiss back, saying that she was not qualified enough, so her candidacy was withdrawn. The girl in a rage shouted that she had a beautiful face and a curvy figure, so why did he reject her? To which the guy squinted, said that he did not like girls who flirt. Someone among the onlookers shouted that this girl spent every night in some night bar. Someone else added that if he had been in the guy's place, he would not have chosen the girl either. Someone else added that the scandal with this girl had gone viral on the internet. Smiling, the guy looked at the running girl and thought that she should now get lost. And then he called the next girl to come to him. A girl in green clothes came and said that she could breathe fire. And the guy raised X and said that then she should go and help Captain America save the world. The next one was a kid with freckles, and she said she could recite poetry. The guy raised his X again and said that the children should go back and focus on studying. Some woman came who said she was sorting garbage and looking at her. A guy with a pale face raised his hand and told this ant that this was not a place to sort garbage. Someone pushed all the girls away in one swing. And some guy appeared in front of the guy wearing makeup on a woman and said that she was born a beauty, so the boss should choose him. Enraged, the guy threw his stick right into the face of this woman and shouted that she was lost. The guy, clutching his head with a heavy sigh, asked if there were no normal candidates. And suddenly raising his head, he saw shiny pink hair. The girl timidly asked if the guy still hires maids. The surprised guy raised his head. He saw a beautiful woman with pink hair and green eyes. She timidly looked away. One of the guys said that it was the university beauty Yi Tun Tun. She's here for this job, too. The other guy sighed and said that alas, even a beauty like her could not resist the temptation of big money. The guy, embarrassed, fell in love already and said that she was a beauty. The girl asked for forgiveness and the guy with hearts instead of eyes shouted that they were hiring her, and then asked what her name was. The girl scratched her cheek in embarrassment, said that her name was Yi Tong Tong, and then she asked if she could try. The guy excitedly shouted that there was no need, she was already hired. The girl looked at the guy uncomprehendingly and he nodded. The girl bowed her head and asked about how much she would receive then. One guy, seeing this, grabbed his heart, saying that she really did it for the money. It broke his heart. Another guy was crying, saying that his Yi Tong Tong was kidnapped by some rich man. The guy thought about thinking about what salary the girl will have. Since this is a maid's job, the salary can't be too high, but for the duration of the probation period. Then the guy fell silent and looked at the girl and said that she would receive 200,000 a month, also 3 meals a day, and housing is provided. He also decided to give her a BMW. After that, the guy asked her how it was. Everyone was at a loss and shouted what he was saying. The guy scratched his head and asked that this was not enough. Hearing the guy's words, everyone got excited and immediately started rushing in his direction, telling him to take him to the ministry. Someone screamed and begged. Someone said that he could be anything or anyone. The guy turned pale from such a crowd, took the girl by the hand, and told her to follow him. The girl was confused, but ran after the guy. Getting into the car, he shouted for her to quickly get into it too. The girl nodded automatically, and people started shouting for him to wait for them too. The guy already breathed out with relief and sitting in the car, said that they were too carried away, but the girl was red as a cancer. The girl told the guy about his hand and he saw that he was holding the girl's hand. He quickly took the hand to himself and asked for forgiveness, saying that he did it unintentionally. The girl said it didn't matter. The guy began to imagine a girl in a beautiful outfit, and imagined how she told him that she had already warmed his bed, whether he wanted to lie down next to her. The whole red guy thought that her hands are so soft. If they are together in the future, then it will be. While he was perversely imagining something, the girl looked at him and smiled and thought that he didn't seem like a bad person to her. She thought he was a pervert if he staged such a performance just to find a maid. But in the end, he just blushed from just holding her hand. He even offered her such a high salary. Now she will definitely be able to pay for her father's treatment. Suddenly the guy screamed, and the girl looked at him with a question. The guy said that he kept looking for a maid, but forgot to buy a villa. The girl, seeing such a guy, thought that he was not a pervert, he was just an idiot. And after a while, the guy looked at the sales center and told the girl that they were here. After he turned around and looked at his big men, he said that everyone except Zio Hai was staying here, and he was following him. The big guys immediately nodded and the guy entered the building. He was immediately met by a girl at the reception, and asked the guy that he was buying a villa for his wedding. From this, both the guy and the girl were embarrassed, and the guy with an awkward smile said that he was not getting married. He was just here to buy a villa. But the guy thought to himself that if the girl was his wife, everything would be fine. The girl worker nodded and pointed to the building, said that he could come and look. Pointing to the houses, the girl said that these are houses that have not yet been sold. The price of this house is 20 million. And this one is 23 million. And this house is 26 million. The girl, hearing such figures in amazement, thought that it is incredibly expensive. Smiling, the guy with a twinkle in his eyes said that the more expensive the better, he buys. Of course, from such words, the girl was in a stupor. At this time, someone from behind asked to wait and asked his girlfriend if she liked this villa. The hero began to turn around with the words, "What happened again?" There was a guy with glasses standing there. There was a girl next to him. The girl smiled and said that she liked it very much, but no matter what he bought for her, she would like everything. The guy with glasses with a serious face said that then he buys this one. The guy, having become enraged, shouted to this young major that it was he who first saw her. The major threw a card into Ning Tao's forehead and told him to take this card with 500,000 in it and get out of here. The guy staggered and almost fell, but the girl supported him. Yi Tong Tong looked at the guy with concern and asked if he was okay, and then suggested that maybe they would choose another house. At this time, that major, pushing the guy away with a glint in his eyes, said that this chick was good. He promised her that he would make sure that she didn't need anything. Circling around her, the guy said that she had a small waist and good breasts. This is what you need. A guy with a perverted smile offered the girl to be his woman. Immediately, the girl who came with this Mr. Khan, smiling, said that she hated him, he was such a playboy. The guy laughed and said that women love bad guys. Ning Tao mentally told Xiao Ba that he needed information about this guy. Xiao Ba brought out a window in front of the guy, said that this information is worth 10 points. The guy's name was Han Wen. He was the only son of Han King, a shareholder of Kyanai Company. Smiling, the guy thought that he had taken his villa and humiliated his girl. He doesn't care whose son he is now. He's already a corpse. Han Wen handed the card to the employee, said that he wanted to buy this house and said that here was his card. The employee bent down to take the card. At this time, the guy snapped his finger and called Xiao Hai, and then the muscular bully threw the rich major away and said that he was here. The big guy took the major card. Han Wen got up and asked who pushed him, and then seeing the big guy with the card in his hand, he asked what he wanted to do with it. But Zia Hai just squeezed the card and crushed it into pieces. The major shouted in despair that his card was over. After placing the gold card, Ning Tao said that this guy wanted to take his villa for only 26 million. This is not going to happen because he pays 30 million. Enraged, the major with glasses shouted that if he wanted it that way, then fine. He is the first who dared to compete with him in monetary expenses. The guy, too, having become enraged with swollen veins and red eyes, shouted that this guy was the first who dared to insult his maid. He should consider that he was already finished. Throwing his card on the table, the major shouted that he did not think that the guy would leave so easily after destroying his card. And then the guy said that he was paying 50 million. The maid and the employee were shocked to hear such figures. The major smiled and said that it was only 50 million. He doesn't feel sorry for some pathetic 50 million. Ning Tao, enraged, shouted that he would pay 90 million, which threw off the bragging major. The heads of the two girls were dizzy from such a sum, and two guys were arguing with each other who would give more money for the villa. Taking Yi Tong Tong's hand, the guy dragged her to him and with red eyes looking at the major, shouted that he did not even think that he could defeat him, and now he has to apologize to Yi Tong Tong. The major turned pale but remained silent. Seeing this, the guy, grinning, asked him what happened, calling him a baby. If he can't afford a villa, then he just has to apologize. He must admit defeat. This place is not for people like him. Ning Tao has enough money to bury this major alive. Hearing all these banter, the major trembled all over and turned pale. The guy continued to say that he was a beggar. He had to go home to cry at mom's. The guy took out all his cards and shouted that he was paying 100 million. This finally finished off the cashier and she blushed all over and fell to the ground, thinking about how much commission she would receive from this transaction. Smiling, the guy said how he felt. Was he scared? And then, teasing him, I told him to continue competing. He has to raise the bid. The guy scratched his nostril with an indifferent face, said that no, this is some kind of bullshit. He should probably stop here. From this behavior, the guy was all blown away. Ning Tao smiled and said that he was not going to pay for a villa that cost 20 million, as much as 100 million. This will not help him show his wealth, but will only make him look like a fool. At this time, the girl who came with Mr. Khan asked if he was a fool. He spent 5 times more than he needed. They just laughed at him. Hearing this, the guy trembled all over. That girl went on to say that she only dated him because he was rich. But given his brain, he won't stay that way for long. He's just a fool, a brainless one with a low IQ. He is capable of nothing but spending money. He must not infect her with his stupidity. The guy fell to his knees, saying that he had been fooled. While Ning Tao told Yi Tong Tong to go from here to look at the other villas, Mr. Han looked at him with anger, thinking that this guy had deceived him. But he would wait and they would look. The guy called a worker who had fallen from joy, pointed to one villa and asked how much it cost. And she pointed to the villa next to the ocean, said that it costs only 27 million. The guy nodded and said that he would pay 30 million for everything, and the employee nodded. At this time, the guy who was arguing with the hero was lying below them and eavesdropping on their conversation. At this time, the major shouted at them to wait, because he pays 50 million for everything. The guy and the girl turned around and saw this guy. The guy's veins swelled from irritation, and he said that it had started again. Smiling, the major said that the villa goes to the one who has a higher bid. If the guy can, then let him offer a higher price. The hero smiled awkwardly and began to hesitate. The major thought to himself that he would retreat as soon as he raised the price. And then Mr. Khan, realizing this, thought that the guy was hesitating. He needed to provoke him. Making a face, Khan said that the guy was just a piece of shit without a penny. Now he shouldn't even think of competing with him, he's just cheap. Smiling broadly, the guy said that since he liked this house, he was giving up. The guy turned to stone in a second and cracked from such an outcome. The girl worker held out the tool to him, and smiled and said that he needed to pay 150 million for all his purchases. The guy turned pale and looked at the payment terminal, and then he turned around and shouted at Ning Tao that he was a scoundrel. How can he be so headstrong? Where can he get so much money now to pay for the villas? Hearing Khan's words, the employee began to get furious and asked the guy that he could not pay for these villas. With fury in her eyes, the girl looked at the major and asked, with a tremor in her voice. Then he immediately pushed about the prices. The employee immediately called the guards in a rage and told them that there was someone problematic here. 3 men appeared from one door in the room and they were all with a muscular build. All of them towering over the trembling guy asked Khan if he was really looking for problems. He didn't want to live anymore, they need to teach this kid a lesson. And they attacked Major Khan and began to teach him life, telling him not to pretend to be rich if he was broke and not wasting someone else's time. Looking at him with a grin, the guy said that it served him right. He would know how to provoke the father. And immediately the guy took out the card and told the employee that he wanted the villa for 30 million. The girl nodded, and the guy meanwhile told Xiaoba to show him if there was progress on his assignment. A window popped up in front of the guy, saying that he needed to spend another 20 million. And the remaining time was only 2 hours. When he looked at the girl, suddenly he had an idea. After a while, they were already in clothing stores, and the guy began to put various clothes on the girl, starting from simple dresses ending with night dresses. The girl looked at the short purple dress that reached only to her hip and was confused. The guy, looking at her with heart-shaped eyes, shouted that he was buying everything she had just tried on. The girl with concern said that she thinks that it is not necessary to buy all this. The surprised guy asked her why it was. Did she really not like them? The girl, touching the pendant with an angel, said that they were too expensive. The guy touched her chin, said that she was silly, then looking straight into her eyes, said that only these clothes would fit his maid. The girl blushed and the guy smiled and approached her lips. As a loud bang sounded in his head, Xiaoba said that the task was completed and he received 250 points as a reward, and the guy also reached the second level. The guy frowned and thought about how it was not at the right time and began to look out his window of characteristics. Xiaoba happily said that he had unlocked a lot of things. He should take a look at it. In his status window, it was that he had raised the level to the second. His strength increased to 12 points and agility to 11, and he also had 200 points available, and 50 points were deducted for previous actions. Looking at all this, the guy happily smiled and thought that all these skills are very useful, but they are very expensive. He has to work harder to earn more points. Well, the system was under his control, so he could easily pick up more points. While he was admiring himself, suddenly someone shouted, telling all units to arrest the target after engaging. Immediately men with machine guns appeared and surrounded the guy and he froze in shock. All pale, he wondered what was going on here. At this time, someone came up to him and asked him that he was Mr. Ning Tao. The guy turned around and saw a man in a white t-shirt and a blue jacket. The man, showing his ID cards, said that the guy was suspected of robbing a bank, so he should go with them to the police station. From such news, the guy already turned pale and fell unconscious. The girl managed to grab him and screamed that there was some kind of mistake. The policeman continued, saying that there was no mistake. Someone reported him. The officer immediately said to arrest the guy, and the girl asked him to say something, and he said that he was dizzy. In the interrogation room, an officer was sitting in front of a table and writing something, and a man in an orange t-shirt was standing next to him and looking at the guy. A guy was sitting opposite them. The officer said that the bank was robbed of 100 million, and an unknown person reported that the guy suddenly received a huge amount of money from unknown sources. The guy thought that someone had snitched. This is definitely the work of Lai Tian and Feng Lily. Then another guy slammed the table in anger and shouted that he had asked him a question, which made the guy flinch. The officer, looking at his colleague, said that his attitude was unacceptable. They should do without violence. The red-haired guy immediately nodded. The guy asked that maybe the officers were mistaken. The officer looked at him indignantly. The guy said with concern that he was an ordinary university student. Where did he get such a lot of money from? Then he said that if they didn't believe him, then let them check his bank account. He didn't have a penny. Suddenly the officer grabbed his arm and lifting him up, the clock appeared. The officer carefully examined the watch, said that he was saying that he was an ordinary student, but no ordinary student could afford such a watch. The guy turned pale and thought that he had just bought them at the mall. They are well-trained police officers. He doesn't have the slightest chance to breed them. The officer, looking at him, told him to tell the truth. The guy thought that he had no other choice and began his story that this is a system for burning money. The officers looked at him without understanding anything, and the guy continued. This system gave him 100 million and forces him to spend it all in a week, otherwise he will be castrated. He has no choice but to squander them every day. But he has nothing to do with the robbery. The guy, looking serious, told them to believe in him. The officers froze for a second, and then both became enraged and shouted that who the hell would believe him. He thought they were idiots. The guy recoiled crying. The officer shouted that the guy was telling the truth, otherwise he would not go anywhere today. The guy in a tearful voice said that he was telling the truth, but they didn't believe him. Suddenly the door to the conference room flew off and all three turned to the crash. Immediately came an apology to the boss for being late. Going through a veil of dust, lawyer Gao Lai said that he, his faithful servant, had come to save the guy. A policeman appeared behind the lawyer and looking at him like an idiot, said, "Stop acting like a tough guy." The policeman informed him that he had a speeding ticket. Soon the lawyer cleaned himself up and stood next to him, told the guy not to worry and left the rest to him. The guy, seeing the lawyer, was inflamed with confidence. Smiling broadly, the guy said that although he could also sort it out, but this time let him sort it out. To himself, the guy was thinking that what a blessing that he was here. Clenching his fist, the lawyer asked the officer if he could ask if they had any evidence to keep his boss here. The officer said they got a tip about a bank robbery and he's the most suspect. 100 million were transferred to his account. The bespectacled man slammed his hand on the table and shouted that it was nonsense. His boss is the company's largest shareholder. Some 100 million is a trifle for him. Don't they know how much his boss has lost because of them? His reputation is now ruined, and they have to take responsibility for it. The officers recoiled from this, but the bespectacled man continued, pointing at them and saying that he wanted to complain about them and call the media here. The officer immediately told the lawyer to wait and added that it was all a misunderstanding. Another officer also supported a colleague, saying that it must be an informant's mistake. 10 minutes later, Ning Tao and the lawyer were already standing in front of the exit of the police station. The guy smiled and said that he was happy that he had a lawyer like Gao Lai. He smiled in response and said that it was his job. At this time, Yi Tong ran up to them and shouting the name of Ning Tao rushed at him, delighted that the guy finally came out. The guy asked her that she was waiting for him here, and the girl said that she was so worried. Because the officer at the entrance did not let her in, she was afraid that something would happen to the guy. Smiling, the guy bravely said that how could this happen to him? And the guy shouted to himself that his goddess was worried about him. For the sake of her attention, he can return 100 more times to prison. The girl sighed with relief and said that it was good. And then she realized that she was still hugging him and, blushing deeply, pushed off feeling fierce shame. With a dizzy head, the girl said that she needed to go to the toilet. The guy said that it was a police station and she froze. At this time, Gao Lai informed the boss that the company would hold a shareholders meeting the day after tomorrow, and he should participate there. The guy asked about what kind of shareholders meeting it was, and Gao Lai, adjusting his glasses, said that he had inherited part of Mr. Tang's shares and someone was concerned about it. In addition, Han King used all the tricks to buy up shares. He already has 4% of the shares. The guy thought about it and thought that isn't Han King Han Wen's father. Then Xiao Ba rumbled in his ear and informed him that the mission was activated. A new notification popped up in front of the guy, saying that the new mission was activated. The mission deadline was the end of the shareholders' meeting. As a reward for completing the mission, he will get 2 points, and as a punishment for a failed mission, he will lose 5 points or his little bird will be castrated. Then it went to accept or cancel, and the guy looking at him thought about why the missions are always connected with his bird. The guy looked out the window of the task and thought. He was thinking that the system was probably joking. How can he take control of all Han King's shares in such a short time? The most important thing is that he doesn't have enough money. The penalty for non-compliance is not worth the risk, so he'd better refuse. Suddenly a girl called the guy, and turning around he saw her. The girl asked him what Mr. Ning was worried about. Did something really happen? The guy awkwardly scratched his head and said that no, it's just little things. She doesn't have to worry about that. Then the guy slapped his finger at Yi Tong Tong and said that tonight they were going back to the villa. The girl, hearing this, bowed her head in embarrassment because only the two of them were returning. The guy, seeing the thoughtful look of the girl, asked what was wrong with it, and she hurriedly said that everything was fine with her. There was a moon in the yard, and in a luxurious building 2 people were sitting on a sofa and an awkward silence hovered between them. The guy was on pins and needles, and the girl was very embarrassed. The guy was sweating all over, thinking that he was too nervous because it was the first time he was alone with his goddess. If this continues, then it will just be a night of watching cartoons. He definitely has to do something. The guy made a thoughtful look and the girl noticed it. Then opening his eyes, the guy looked at Yi Tong Tong and said that he thinks it's time for the girl to start doing her job. Isn't that right? The girl got up in excitement, immediately panicked and said that she did not know that it was working time, and bowed, apologized and said not to be fired. The guy is at a loss, said that he did not mean it. The girl asked with interest if the guy could tell her what the maid should do. She doesn't have any experience in this. The guy scratched his head and said he didn't know either. She can start by wearing a maid costume. The girl turned around excitedly and said that then she would immediately go and change her clothes. The girl closed the door behind her, and after a while she had already put on the red clothes of a Chinese maid and was now wearing white stockings. Pulling on stockings, the girl confusedly thought that it was rather strange to be a maid for her. Shouldn't she be ready for this from the moment she got this job? The door opened and a figure entered the room. The guy eating chips turned around and saw Yi Tong Tong in a cute maid costume. She, playing with her fingers and embarrassed, asked about what she should look like. The guy, looking at it with his heart-shaped eyes, clenched his fists closer to himself and mentally said that it was just amazing. The girl, embarrassed, asked if the guy was happy, to which he, with a wide smile, said that he was still very happy. The girl averted her gaze, embarrassedly asked about what she should do after that. The guy, charmed by such a cute side of the girl, blushed all over and froze. But he quickly pulled himself together and fireworks started playing in his head. Smiling nastily, he thought about the fact that the maid's suit was unpacked. Where was his gratitude? He thought about what he should hear, gratitude in his direction. At this time in the Han house, in the study of the father of the family, there were 3 people in the room. An old man with gray hair was sitting at the table. A blonde guard was standing next to him, and Han Wan was sitting in a wheelchair. All bruised and bruised, Han Wan, crying, said that this bastard Ning Tao had fooled him. His father should avenge him. The father of the family slammed the photo of Ning Tao on the table and said that it was outrageous. Gritting his teeth, the old man said that he would no longer be gentle with this little bastard. He humiliated the honor of his family, and this is unacceptable for them. Enraged, the old man looked at his son with bloodshot eyes and shouted that he had such a low level of intelligence that he was so easily deceived. Crying, he said that he inherited it from his father. For such words, the old man punched his son in the face and shouted at him to get out of here, because he doesn't have such a stupid son. After that, the old man turned to the guard and told him to find out the whole background of this Ning Tao. He nodded and left, but the old man smiled maliciously and said that during the shareholders' meeting, he wanted the guy to suffer. At this time in the villa, a guy and a girl were sitting in the same room. The guy asked her to do a little higher. The girl, trying to please the guy, asked what was so normal, and the guy with pleasure said that yes, she should be a little more gentle and faster. The girl, doing as she was told, asked if she was doing everything right, and the guy nodded in a smile of bliss. Leaning back in his chair, the guy said that seeing how the girl works with pens, she probably often massages people. The girl said with embarrassment that this was her first time. The guy was pleased to think that this is her first time, and she already does massage so well. She is not only beautiful, but also quick to learn. Suddenly, the guy, assuming an unperturbed look, stared at the center of gravity of the girl. and immediately blushing, he thought that he was a dead man because the ancient seal was broken. The ancient demon already seems ready for battle. The guy immediately looked around and found a book to quickly distract himself. Picking up the book, he saw strange pictures with a title like Pushing from Behind, or Sitting in the Buddha Pose, or The Movement of the Poisonous Dragon. Seeing this, the guy couldn't help but think what it was doing here. With a dizzy head, the guy thought that if Yi Tong Tong found out about this, he immediately imagined her looking at him with contempt and saying that she didn't think he was such a pervert. Mentally, the guy prayed that God would send him an angel to help, and then, as if his pleas had reached the right place, someone called him. The guy immediately picked up the phone and greeted the monkey, thinking to myself that this is very timely. The monkey told him to help him and explained that Da Pan's scooter had scratched the Ferrari. Obviously it's that guy's fault, but he wants them to pay $1 million. The guy, getting up in an instant, shouted for them to wait for him there. He will be there now. At this time, on the street, a monkey was shouting at some man, which is obvious that this bastard hurt them, so they also have to pay him. The fat man smiled and said that the guy had scratched his car, so he had to pay $1 million or he would break their leg. The monkey screamed, saying that there is such a cool thing in Ferrari. Now they will wait until Tao arrives and then this person will be shocked out of his mind. Smiling maliciously, the fat man said that what kind of Tao was he talking about? Let him come, and the fat man promises that he will kill him along with these two. At this time, a car drove right in front of him, showering him with dust, and the fat man froze in shock. Out of the car came a handsome man whom the world has not seen. Ning Tao smiled and asked who was going to kill him and took off his glasses. The fat man hit the place of the injury of his wheelbarrow and shouted that they stop talking nonsense. Enraged with swollen veins, the fat man pointed at them and shouted that if they didn't give him $1 million, they shouldn't even think about leaving here. The monkey in indignation shouted that $1 million lies only in the bank. He can go and rob him. The fat man stamped his foot and began to lift his sleeve, showing a tattoo of some kind of skeleton. Straining his biceps, the fat man, smiling maliciously, said that he wanted to rob them and not the bank. He has some kind of problem with that. Doesn't he know him, the debt bully? They must not provoke him, or he will kill them so that they will not even understand how they died. The guy nodded and stood between the two of them and said that so, and maybe he would pay, which surprised both the monkey and the fat man. Smiling broadly, the guy took out his smartphone and said that he was talking about $1 million, right? He uses a QR code. The monkey, looking at his friend, asked if he was crazy, but the guy looked at his friend and said nothing. But the fat man was grinning like a real demon. At this time, the phone confirmed that the transfer was made and 2 people took the smartphones back. The fat man turned around, chuckled and said that it was good that he knew what to do. But Ning Tao did not let the fat man leave, which annoyed him. The guy smiled maliciously and said that they had paid for the damage to his car, but what about their moped? Grinning, the guy looked at the white moped held by the blue-haired kid and said that he meant this junk. Well, so be it. Let him name the price. He will pay everything. Smiling, the guy said that would this fat man be able to pay the full price, because this junk has rocket engines. It also has jet fighter radar systems installed on it. It has the anti-missile matrix of an aircraft carrier and also the armor of a tank. Sea, sky, earth and space, this moped is all in one. A fat man should not even think to get away without paying at least 10 lakhs. He'll kill the fat man if he doesn't pay. Seeing such a face of the opponent, the fat man was already scared and turned pale and recoiled. But soon he came to his senses and pointing at the guy shouted that this simply could not be. How that junk can be worth 10 million. The hero asked if he was sure of his words. The fat man shouted that he would not give anything so big. Taking out a megaphone, the guy said that since he was not going to pay, then he should not come to him to cry after. After that, the guy shouted loudly into a megaphone to get all the attention to him. And he started inventing a story about this man all over the street in order to embarrass him in front of everyone. Immediately people began to come out of the houses. One man looked from the balcony and spat, saying that he already knew that this guy was bad, but did not think that he was so disgusting. An ant came out from another balcony and said that he even accosted strangers. It was so disgusting. Immediately, accusations began to be thrown at the poor fat man's head. Someone said that at first glance he could tell that this fat man was bad. Someone laughed at such a fool. The fat man blushed all over and then turned pale, and in the end, becoming enraged, pointed at the guy and shouted that how did this guy find out? But then he added that what he meant was that the guy made it all up. The fat man did nothing. The guy told the fat man to look at his phone. If the guy wants, then everyone will know the secrets of the fat man. He opened the phone and saw photos of all his accusations. And dumbfounded, looking at them with bulging eyes, I wondered how this guy got all these photos. Smiling maliciously, the guy thought that he shouldn't have started a fight with him, because Xiao Ba had already studied the whole background on the fat man. Xiao Ba looked into every corner. He ordered it to him when the argument was just beginning. The fat man at that moment fell to his knees with a crash. Clinging to the guy's leg, he shouted that he was wrong. He will pay as much as the guy says. If only he did not spread this information. The guy is looking at him with condemnation. He said he wasn't interested in his apologies, he should just pay. After a while, a notification came to the phone saying that the bully had transferred 10 million to him. Grinning maliciously, the guy thought that he had earned 10 million so easily. After that, the guy looked at the elixir of luck. The description said that it costs 500 points and it increases luck. Everything goes according to the plan of the one who drinks it. The guy thoughtfully looking at him thought that now he can exchange his glasses for some kind of remedy. Maybe he can try it. He has 390 points and he still needs 110 points. The guy grabbed the shoulders of his friends and said that he would take them to where they would not have the courage. The guy with blue hair asked with interest where he would take them. The monkey asked if it would be fun and exciting there. The guy smiled and told them both to relax. It would be another exciting adventure. Soon, the car stopped in front of the heavenly hall. Coming out of it, the three friends looked at everything with surprise. The guy pointed to this place and said that it was a heavenly hall. The guy with blue hair asked if it wasn't a casino. They can even enter. The guard at the entrance stopped them and said that he was sorry, but minors were not allowed in the heavenly hall. But the guy threw a card at him and shouted for him to open his eyes and take a closer look. The guard saw the card with the Kyanai Corporation and the name Ning Tao. He shouted that the guy was from such a large company. The guard immediately shouted for the other staff to hurry up, because they had important clients. They should hurry up and greet them. Girls of different beauty and appearance stood in a row and politely smiled and greeted them to the heavenly hall. The guy smiled and thought that according to Xiao Ba, this place is the largest casino in the city. He can't believe they got through here so easily. The guy on the phone shouted to his friends that today he would let them come off to the fullest. A man with purple hair saw it. He looked at them with a smile and reported on the radio that they had caught a big catch. In the casino, a girl in kitty and bunny costumes walked between the tables. Looking at all this splendor, the guy said that this place is amazing. The blue-haired man looked at everything with shock. One girl approached them and asked them to let them show everything. Following the guide, the blue-haired guy examined everything, and the girl explained everything. She said there were slot machines, card tables, and gaming tables in front of her. At this time, someone called the blue-haired man, and turning around, he saw a beautiful lady with blue hair and with a card in her hands. She asked the guy if he wanted to play a couple of games with her. The guy with heart-shaped eyes looked at the charms of a girl and couldn't help but think about how big they were. The guy grabbed his friend by the shoulder and told him to stop staring. They have serious business here today. The guy in a panic asked what their business was. Ning Tao handed the card, told the employee to bring them the chips. She took the card and nodded. Soon, the guy formed whole stacks of chips of different calibers. The guy, giving a little to his friends, stunned them with this, and they looked at the chips, asked him what it really was for them. The guy nodded and said that but he had one condition. Raising his finger in front of him, he said that they should lose everything. Soon the games began and the guy put his chips on the table, shouted, tipsy, that he would start with dice. Onlookers were drooling at his chips. There were so many chips here, how much is there in the money? There must be at least 10 million here. It looks like some crazy rich kid. After throwing 5 chips, the guy said that he was betting 500,000 and then added that he was tripling. In order for him to win on the dice, all threes must fall out. Then he was asked to apologize and push the chips back. The girl worker smiled and said that the biggest bid should not exceed 100,000. Clicking, the guy took the chips and gave only 100,000. The dealer began to shake the chips and slamming them on the table, said that she was opening. It came out 3, 3 and 5. The guy looked at it indifferently, said that he was betting on triple again, and the girl smiled and said that it could be arranged without problems. One of the onlookers told a friend that in fact he was just burning money. His friend said that he seemed to be crazy. Triple drops out very rarely. The guy himself, with a pale face, thought that he just wanted to lose in order to get points. Every time he loses 100,000. At this rate, when will he be able to lose all 10 million? The guy turned around and said that the bets were too small and therefore he was bored, which surprised the dealer. At this time, someone turned to the guy and the guy looked in that direction and saw a blonde. She came up to him in his ear and told him that if he thinks the stakes are too small here, then he can go with her. The guy clenched his fist and told her to show the way. After a while, they were already standing in front of the golden door. When the guy entered it, he saw a man sitting on a red chair. There were chips on the table in front of him, and he himself was enjoying dark chocolate. The man smiled and said that his name was Gao Bujin, and he welcomed a dear guest. Looking at him, the guy got the idea that this guy seems to be cosplaying some Hollywood cool player. The man began to take out cards and mahjong chips, as well as dice. Smiling, he said that they had poker, mahjong, and dice. What does the guy prefer? Ning Tao scratched his head and asked about the dice. This is something he is more or less familiar with. The man smiled and said that they had a bid of 500,000, whether the guy would dare. Ning Tao smiled and said that this was not enough, they could raise up to 1 million. From such a proposal, even a professional player turned pale and covered in sweat. At this time, an old man was watching the guy sitting in the surveillance room. It was the owner of the casino. His name was Wan Jin and he was currently sipping tea. Looking at the bored face of the guy, the old man who was the owner of the Heavenly Hall laughed, saying that this dude is funny and therefore he likes it. The blonde showed up behind the old man, said that everyone likes people who give money without question. Laughing loudly, the old man told the girl to bring a few more of the same players and his business would skyrocket. At this time, a lot of onlookers gathered in the room where Ning Tao and that guy were playing. At the table, a man picked up some kind of card. At this time, a blonde guy was looking at the guy and said that even being the French king of gambling, he had never been so crazy. Another man said that as the best Indian player, he had never thrown so much money away. A man in a hat immediately intervened and said that as the only pirate player from the Caribbean, he thought that no one could be more reckless than him. But it seems he was wrong. There was also a Japanese player who said that in Japan everyone knows to avoid playing dice with Gao Bujin. Gao Bujin himself, with the dice in his hands, was the king of all dice. 1, 5, 3 fell out and Gao Bujin won again. The man, spreading his hands, advised the kid to stop betting on a triple, because the probability that he will fall out is very low. He should look at his chips because more than half of them are gone. The guy bet 1 million on triple again. And seeing this, Gao Bujin couldn't help but think that it looks like the guy doesn't care at all. Smiling, Gao Bujin thought to himself that it looks like a stupid idiot. He dares to test Gao Bujin, but he will never get a triple. Deftly shaking the chips, Gao Bujin opened them again and got 1, 1 and 3, and again he won. Smiling, he looked at the guy and asked what he would say. He threw the chips and said that he was betting 4 million, which stunned Gao Bujin. And even worse was the fact that the guy bet on triple again. Gao Bujin's veins were already swollen from irritation on his arm, but he was thinking that if he didn't win this guy's money, he would be in a very bad position. And again, after the showdown, Gao Bujin won. 5, 5 and 6 fell out. Laughing loudly, Gao Bujin shouted that the guy was an idiot. Who is he to play dice with him? The very Gao Bujin. He would take every penny from him. One of the onlookers looking at the guy said that this man is so stupid that he continues to make inserts on triple. Someone else supported a colleague, saying that he thought he had some kind of insidious plan. The third one said he thinks this guy is just an idiot. Rich but stupid, he'd rather spend this money on brain surgery. At this time, a notification popped up in front of the guy saying that he had received 500 points and he could buy the elixir of luck, whether he wanted to buy it. The guy nodded, threw the chips and smiled and said that the show was starting. A new notification popped up in front of the guy, saying that he had used the elixir of luck. And the system reported that the guy was blessed by the goddess of luck. A reboot of luck has begun and a blessed journey has appeared. The guy opened his eyes shining with gold. At this time, Gao Bujin smiled and told him to stop dreaming. He only had 1 million left. Would he really risk betting again? The guy smiled and said that he would bet everything on it and poured the chips on the table. Gao Bujin smiled villainously and thought that as he wanted, he would finish the guy off with one blow. When Gao Bujin wanted to shake the dice, immediately the gambling king from France and the pirate player shouted for Gao Bujin to wait, because they also want to join the game. Gao Bujin looked at them with disdain and asked how they were going to play at all. The Indian player smiled and said that they would not play themselves. They would just bet on the outcome of the game. Gao Bujin looked at these four and thought that they were a bunch of greedy losers. Seeing how stupid that guy is, they all want to tear off a piece from him. The guy smiled and said that it could be arranged without any problems. He is in poverty and the only thing he has left is money. They can place their bets. If he loses, he will pay them twice as much. Upon hearing him, everyone immediately began to place bets. Someone put 8 million, someone 10, someone 20, and someone in general all 50 million. And they all bet on the guy losing. The same one just smiled all the time. Galbu Jin, getting excited, shouted that there was no way back then, and, shaking the bones, shouted that he was opening. The bowl began to crack, and with a golden flash that blinded everyone, everyone began to look at the table with expectation, because an unprecedented jackpot was waiting for them. And now the glow began to fade and the cubes showed 3 6s, which means that a triple fell out and the guy won. Seeing such an outcome, all the players were shocked. A Japanese player took out a sword and decided to make a senpoku. A pirate player took out a pistol and put its muzzle into his skull. Everyone shouted that it was impossible. No one believed in it. They lost to a guy who looks like a student at all. The mug in the casino owner's hand broke from the strain, and the old man himself looked at it with a pale face, asking about how this is possible. The blonde was also stunned. The guy himself was pleased and began to think out loud. The gambling king of France put 8 million, the gambling magician of India put 10 million, a pirate and a player from the Caribbean put 20 million. The king of gambling in Japan bet 50 million and Galbu Jin himself, representing the casino, lost 100 million, and it turns out that he won 200 million. The players, enraged, clung to Galbu Jin, shouting that he was one with this kid. Did he really want to bend them? The man said he wasn't with him, but the players didn't believe him, saying he was lying. Wasn't he the one who controlled the cubes? The guy looked away at the entrance to the room and saw that figures appeared at the entrance. He immediately wrote to the monkey to bring the boys right away. At this time, the owner of the establishment came into the room and in a rage, pointing at the guy, he shouted about how such a brat dared to play with him. The guy got up from his seat and turned towards the crowd, glaring in his direction. Picking his nose, the guy said that this old man calls him a cheater just because he lost. It's so pathetic. The old man's veins on his forehead swelled with rage, and he shouted for the guy to shut up, because this is his territory, and his words are the law here. He immediately directed angry bald guards at the guy, who had clubs in their hands. Immediately, the old man shouted for them to break the guy. But at that moment someone fell and everyone looked in the other direction where the boys of Ning Tao gathered. The monkey pointed to the owner and said that this man was the owner of the casino, and he did not want to pay, although he had lost money to them. The boys, enraged, shouted that they just needed to beat him. Apparently he was too greedy. He treats them like fools. This cannot be forgiven. A general scuffle immediately began. Someone said that he had never won today. They probably did something with the slot machines. Someone said that he had won, but who cares? The monkey showed the guy okay, said that he had received Brother Tao's message and called a couple of guys, about 1,000 per person. The guy smiled and gave a thumbs up and said that the monkey worked perfectly. The guy crouched down in front of the old man with an evil grin, asked him if he was cheating. The old man with a battered face and a crumpled body said with a shudder that he had not cheated and he would pay everything. Soon, notification after notification started coming to the guy's phone. All those who had lost before began to transfer money to him one after another. The guy smiled contentedly and thought that he had received 200 million again. After spending them, he will get as many as 2,000 points and it will be very easy for him. Suddenly his phone rang and picking it up, the guy greeted his aunt. Suddenly he heard very bad news for himself, which he did not expect today. His aunt informed him that his uncle had an accident and he is now in the First Sun Yun Hospital. The stars were full of stars in the sky, and under the night sky, our hero's car was driving at full speed. Inside the car, the guy was sitting anxiously and looking out the window. He remembered when he was small, he was brought into the family of his uncles, and they raised him. His uncle accepted him as his own son. He trained him, fed him, and took care of him. Their family was not rich, so uncle had to work hard and a lot, but thanks to this he could afford to pay for the guy's education at the university. The guy raised his head up and asked his uncle to be unharmed. After a while in the hospital, someone shouted for everyone to get out of his way, pushing everyone away and asking them to get out of his way. The guy squeezed between people and each time asked for forgiveness and said that he wanted to pass. Soon, he saw a middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man, too. The woman looked at Tao with concern and bowed her head and said that he had finally come. The guy, all out of breath, asked about his uncle, if he was okay. My aunt said he was fine. He just injured his leg. He needs to be hospitalized for a while. The guy sighed with relief and said that it was good. And then he noticed the man. The guy pointed at him and asked his aunt who this guy was he really a friend of Dad's? The woman looked at the man and said that it was the man who hit his uncle. The guy immediately became enraged and asked him that he was the one who knocked down his uncle. The man spread his hands, said that he did not blame him for this, because he was just blind. He did not see where he was going. After that, the guy pointed to his Lamborghini outside, said that his car was scratched. He didn't ask them to pay for it. The guy was even more enraged and with bloody eyes asked what his attitude was after he crashed into someone. The man smiled and began to take money out of his wallet and told the guy to stop yelling. He sees through these poor tricks of theirs. They need money for medical expenses, so then let them take it. The man held out a pack of bucks to his aunt, and when she wanted to be taken, the man accidentally let go of his hand. And then the villain smiled and said that he was sorry. Apparently the money slipped out of his hands. The woman looked at the banknotes on the ground and stood in a stupor. The man smiled and asked what they were waiting for. They have to raise. She hasn't paid for medical care yet. Why doesn't this kid pick up that money for her? Pointing at the guy, the man said that the guy lowered his gaze to the floor, to the money, and then he laughed out loud. The woman looked at the floor and squeezed her lips and closed her eyes, sat down on the floor. But as soon as she wanted to take the money, the guy stopped her. Smiling, he told his aunt to be sure that the guy would pay all his uncle's medical expenses. The woman looked at him blankly, but the guy picked it up without saying anything and then looking at the man, said that he no longer needed to pay for medical services, but he has to get down on his knees and apologize to his aunt. The guy looked at the man with a bloodthirsty look, but it didn't even affect him. He just smiled, snapped his fingers, and asked what they wanted him to apologize. It's not even funny. And then the earth began to rise from the floor next to him, and soon some miners appeared and introduced themselves as the Gopher Brothers. After looking at the guy, they asked him that he was the one who was looking for problems with their boss. He was tired of living. The aunt looked at the guy and told him to forget about it. They can't fight these rich people. At that moment, that man, spreading his hands, said that his aunt was right to speak. He should listen to his aunt and just take the money. He wants the man to get down on his knees and apologize to her. He wouldn't have done it if she was his own grandmother. Suddenly Ning Tao raised his hand and this interested the man and he looked towards the guy, and when he clicked, the man even fell into a stupor. And a second later, loudly holding his stomach, he burst out laughing, saying that this guy is a stupid little man who even learned to snap his fingers like him. Does he think that someone will come to his aid? Suddenly there was a patter of several feet and the men abruptly stopped talking. Looking around, he asked what earthquakes were. One of the Gopher brothers asked what was going on here. The ceiling was cracking. And after a while, the big guys came to the hospital. A crowd of big guys. No, a whole gang of big guys in black suits. From this kind of man already turned pale, and when the bouncers began to surround them, all three squeezed between them, wondering what was going on here. Immediately, the two gophers rushed underground and told the boss to be careful. The man became desperate from this and his eyes popped out of their sockets. He shouted at them not to leave him. At this time, one of the giants in a black suit put his palm on his shoulder and the man turned pale. Towering over the man, one of the bouncers clenched his fist and asked that he was the one who created problems for their boss. He was already white with fear. He immediately fell to his knees and bowing in front of the guy shouted that he was sorry and that he did not recognize the guy. He shouted that he would be his servant and crawl on his knees begging for forgiveness. Looking down at him, the guy said to get out, there is no place for such garbage here. The guy immediately called Xiao Hai, and the big guy with black glasses and a black suit straightened up and said that he was here. The guy pointed to that Lamborghini on the street and told Xiao Hai to go and smash it. The bully said he understood the boss. With batons in their hands, they walked towards the car. That man blocked their way, asking what they were going to do with his car. He won't let them touch his car. But the man flew away from one blow. And soon the first bit hit the headlight of the car. In desperation, the man with tears in his eyes shouted about his headlights. Then the doors went, but then the windshield went. He begged them to stop. While the guy was shouting, suddenly he heard a crash and turned around and saw a road roller and his eyes popped out of their sockets. Soon the road roller walked over the car and a second later only the seal on the ground was not left of the gorgeous car. The guy fell to his knees with despair and began to call out to his Lamborghini. And then a rain of money fell on his head and he raised his head in surprise and saw Ning Tao. He looked at the man with contempt, said that this was payment for his car. Now he has to pack up and get out of here. The man's eyes were bloodshot and looking at the guy, he said that it was unforgivable. Getting up from his seat, he shouted that he had just called the big shots. Now he can consider that he is already a corpse. Officers immediately appeared and seeing the man asked him that he had just received a message about a broken car. And then looking at him, asked that it was his call. The man immediately grabbed Captain Zhao's leg and told Tom that he had to avenge him. His car was smashed, he was bullied. The officer, looking at the guy with bewilderment, asked what and who, how could this happen in general? Then the guy smiled and raised his hand greeting Captain Zhao and telling him that a lot of time had passed since their meeting. The officer also smiled and asked the guy what he was doing here, but that man was shocked by this turn. He was petrified when he realized that they knew each other. The guy smiled and handed the lawyer's business card to Gao Lai and said that if they had any questions, they could contact him. While the guy was talking, his bouncers were quietly sneaking away. Taking the card, the officer remembered Gao Lai's lawyer and how last time he shouted at them that they were responsible for the reputation of his boss. The officer immediately turned pale and thought that it was difficult to cope with this guy's lawyer. The man pointed at Ning Tao and told Captain Zhao that this was the guy who crashed his Lamborghini. The captain took out a cigarette and started lighting it, said that it was just in time, he needed to ask him something. He recoiled from this, and the captain continued, saying that tonight, an unlicensed Lamborghini ran a red light and hit a man. After the incident, the owner of the car wanted to escape from the crime scene. Fortunately, the police stopped him. Opening his eyes, the captain asked that this Lamborghini could not be his, could it? From such a question, the man turned completely white, and then immediately came to himself, said that how could this be? He's got a BMW. Officers immediately grabbed the man and said he had just said he had a Lamborghini, so he has to go with them. The guy in despair shouted that they had taken the wrong one, and then added that he had recently had dinner with their boss. He wanted to meet with him and he wanted to call his lawyer. He will complain. Ning Tao, looking at this situation, grinned, saying that he was a fool who called the police to get caught. Suddenly someone shouted, which scared Ning Tao. When he turned around, he saw his aunt in a rage. She clenched her fist and asked him where he got so much money from. Who are those people dressed in black? Did his nephew join the underworld? The guy awkwardly scratched his head, told his aunt not to worry and explained that he had received this money from the business he was engaged in. Xiao Ba immediately spread her hands and said that aha, she believed in him. Suddenly the guy stopped and asked his aunt where his cousin was and why she still hadn't come. The woman said that she called to say that she was on the way, but after that, no matter how many times her aunt called her, they could not get through. The guy, looking away, thought that his cousin had always been loyal. It was impossible that she would not come. It can't be an accident. Smiling, he said goodbye to his aunt and said that he would go and find her. Then the guy asked his aunt to stay here and look after his uncle. She nodded and asked the guy to be careful. After a while, the guy was already driving through the streets of the city in his car. In the car, the guy asked Xiao Ba if there was any way to find his cousin, and looking for something in the map, he said that there was, and it was a super navigation system. Then Xiao Ba reported that the target was marked with a red dot, it was her cousin. However, for using this system, he will have to spend 5 points for every minute. The guy looked at Xiao Ba suspiciously and said that she was still mean. He tells the cons of the option after turning it on. Xiao Ba said here that he had a friendly reminder, namely, the goal is now in danger, which made the guy even more serious. The guy immediately pressed the gas pedal and began to go around all the cars on the road. First uncle, now cousin, it definitely can't be a simple coincidence. Someone is clearly sharpening a grudge against the guy. A beautiful girl with scarlet hair was dancing on the stage, and looking at this sight, the guy was at a loss why his cousin came here. Suddenly he heard voices asking someone to drink, hurry up and drink everything. Looking in that direction, he saw 3 men of gangster appearance and 1 girl with green hair. One of the bandits with a scar held the girl by the shoulders and forced her to drink, but the girl kicked. The guys told her to have a drink with them, and when she drinks, she will become their girlfriend. The girl screamed that she said no and pushed the drink away, which caused it to spill. The scarred guy, enraged, slapped the girl in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. The guy screamed at her to be damned. He invited her, and she still refuses. Rising above her, all 3 of them looked at her with frowning glances. Before, there was no one who dared to refuse him. While the blonde was saying that it had never happened before that someone refused him, and at that time Ning Tao approached him. On the move, he hit him right in the dignity and shouted that to hell with his dignity. From the pain, the guy's eyes popped out of his head and he grabbed at one place, shouting that he was finished. 2 other bandits, seeing such a big brother, asked if he was okay. One of them immediately added that he needed to go to the hospital urgently. The guy bent down in front of his cousin and asked her if she was okay. The girl raised her head and asked Tao why he was here, and then, grabbing him by the hand, she said that they should run. The guy told her to wait. Why are they running away at all? The girl said that now is not the time for questions, she will answer them later. The blonde got up with the help of his brother, becoming enraged, asked that these 2 want to escape, but this will happen only in their dreams. Pointing at them, the blonde man shouted to the brothers to stop these 2. Today the beer will be at his expense. Immediately other people appeared in front of the girl and all with the appearance of bandits. The guy standing in front said that Mr. Meng, that he didn't need to be so modest. If it's something that's simple, someone else from the gang said that they made a noise here, they are now definitely dead. The girl with tears in her eyes asked Tao for forgiveness and said that it was all her fault. The guy, standing in front of her, told her not to worry and straightening his tie, asked her to leave the rest to him. The bandit, laughing loudly, said that the guy was so naive. There are a lot of customers here. How can he bribe them all? Suddenly a brick crashed into the blonde man's head. The latter, enraged, turned around and clenched his fist and asked about who did it. One of them has no eyes and he hit him with a brick. If he catches this man, he will. Then the crowd with batons and cans of drinks in their hands asked him if he caught them what. The guy said they were going to die, but not so sure anymore. At this time, Ning Tao smiled maliciously, waving a banknote, said that the only one who is naive here is him. Showing a piece of money, the guy said that there was a saying. If you have money, then people will always help you. But if the top players are broke, then no one will lift a finger. The crowd screamed in anger and one of them shouted that he had hated this blonde for a very long time. Even if the guy didn't give the money, he would still beat him up. Someone shouted that no matter who paid them the money, they would listen to him. They should do it all together. The blonde man screamed, shutting his eyes so that he would not be, especially in the face. Seeing that his words did not pass, the guy shouted that he had told them to stop hitting him. Immediately, the blonde man shouted for the master to save him. Immediately, a strange wind appeared around the room, which, throwing everyone away, turned out to be next to the blonde. It turned out to be an old man with a long gray beard and hair. The old man told his student not to worry, because he was here, which pleased the blonde man, whose whole face was already crumpled. The blonde man immediately shouted that all these guys were dead, because his master Duan Liu Hai was here. Everyone immediately dropped their weapons. Someone said that Duan Liu Hai is a powerful master. Someone else said that there are rumors that he knocked out everyone on the street 10 years ago. The guy grinned at the blonde and said that he thinks he got here from a martial arts movie. The old man chuckled and immediately stepping on people's shoulders, said on the move that he would let this guy see what he was capable of. After his words, the old man found himself over the guy and shouted for this bastard to die. The guy, pale as chalk, thought that this dude is really a martial artist. Given his speed of 100 meters per second and special skills that can cause a lot of damage, it can be assumed that his combat power is more than 10,000. He will not be able to live more than 3 seconds after his blow. What should he do? He urgently needs to come up with a plan. What can the spending system do to save his life? Xiao Ba said they can save him, but it costs 1,000 points. The guy, enraged, began shaking Xiao Ba and shouted about where he should find so many points right now. How should he earn these points if he is dead? Xiao Ba said no way. This is a rule of the system. Because he is a beginner, the system gives him invincible powers. Looking after Xiao Ba, the guy shouted for him to come back. What other super invincible forces? And how the banana skin will help here. The guy realized that the master was approaching and immediately began to get out of his way. He was able to do it and the old man landed right next to him, stepped on a banana peel and fell. The guy looking at this event was in shock. The old man fell unconscious and his false mustache and wig flew off. Everyone looked at it with complete indignation. The guy asked that the issue was resolved. Immediately, a blonde man approached the old man and grabbed him and asked how he felt. He was his disciple. He would definitely avenge the master. People took out their weapons again and smiled and asked him what he was talking about. Revenge aside, he won't even be able to survive today. The blonde man in despair shouted for someone to help him, but no one cared about him. After a while, the guy handed his cousin a check with 1 million yuan and said that it was money for uncle's treatment. The girl, seeing the numbers, could not restrain her exclamation, which is why the guy turned pale and told her to be quiet. The guy told her that they were in public and she shouldn't be so loud. The girl asked him in response that where he found such money. The girl immediately looked at him accusingly and asked if he had done something illegal, or it's not a real check, or even worse, he got involved with bandits. The guy, almost crying, thought that this was going to happen again. Why everyone doubts him. After leaving the establishment, the guy pointed to the side and said that there was an uncle there. The girl immediately turned around and saw that there was nothing there, and when she turned around, the guy was already driving the car, saying that everything was fine with the money. The girl asked him to wait and explain everything normally, but he had already run away. Clenching her teeth, the girl said that this guy ran away faster than a rabbit from a hunter. At that time, someone was watching the girl behind the wall, and he informed his boss by phone that the yuan had failed. On the other side of the handset, the smartphone flew to the ground and an angry cry was heard, saying that it was all a waste. They were a bunch of garbage. It was an old man from the Han family and in anger he shouted that these scum couldn't even do that. His son was sitting on the sidelines and looking at his father. He said that they could not let this kid do whatever he wanted. The old man smiled and told the guy to be sure, because his father has other ways. A little more patience and that kid's shares will be theirs. At this time, Ning Tao was breathing a sigh of relief, thinking that he had finally escaped. He was afraid that his cousin would be involved in all this. Then suddenly a voice was heard in the guy's head telling him that a new mission had become available for the user. Enraged, the guy shouted at Xiao Ba saying that she was a scoundrel. Is she trying to scare him to death or something? Zhu the Wise said that he shouldn't be so cruel. It's a charity mission. The guy looked at Xiao Ba with interest and she said that everything was right. This time she wants the guy to conquer the star Jun Join. As a reward, the guy will get 1,000 points and 2 full attributes. If he loses, he will be turned into a girl. A guy with a pale face said that anywhere his baby would be a bet he could not accept. He's been busy all night. He needs to go back and get some sleep. Putting her hand on the guy's shoulder, Xiao Ba said with a cruel face that he had already refused a mission once. If he refuses again, she will trigger the primary punishment. From such a guy already turned white. Turning around, the guy recoiled and clenching his legs shouted that he was accepting the task. He's already accepted it, isn't that enough? He asked Xiao Ba to stop threatening him and stop thinking about his little bird. Smiling, Xiao Ba wished him luck with the warmest smile. Then the guy remembered Yi Tong Tong. He had recently met her, and now he has to meet another girl. The condition of the quest was that he had a bad feeling about it. In the scene of a musical charity concert, bubbles were flying in the sky and music was heard everywhere. Fans raised their hands and waved their sticks. On stage, a golden-haired girl sang a song saying that even if she gave up the world, at least she would still have it. The girl sang these with feeling and after finishing the song thanked everyone. The voices of the fans immediately rang out. Someone said that he loves Qin Ruo Ying. Among this crowd of fans was Ning Tao, who admired the girl. The guy was thinking that this is a really profitable task. He never thought that in reality she would look 100 times better than on TV. Although it was written on his forehead that he was a fool, the guy with drool in his mouth thought that he should get this chick. He immediately threw the money, put his hand in the seal and used the spiritual art of distributing money. Immediately people greedy for money began to collect banknotes retreating from his path. He smugly walked among them goals, listening to people saying that there was a rain of money. Everyone said that they saw this rain first and bickered with each other. The girl on the stage saw that her fans began to fight and did not understand why they were doing it. Approaching the stage, a guy with a bouquet of roses, which is made of money, in his hand called this beauty to count money with him. Fixing his hair and smiling broadly, the guy said that he was from the Giant E Corporation, but he was immediately pushed away. 3 grandfathers appeared. One shouted that he had heard that she is holding a charity concert because he is donating 500,000 to support her. The second old man said that 500,000 is nothing. He donates 800,000. The third old man immediately exclaimed that he would donate 1 million if Zhou Wu agreed to have lunch with him. Qin Ruo Ying, seeing this swearing, told everyone to stop swearing. As long as it's for the sake of good intentions, she will try her best and satisfy everyone's desire. Looking at the old people, the guy thought that it was not surprising. Because she is a celebrity, the competition has only intensified. The guy grinned and said that it was just a few old men. They would not be able to win against him, and as soon as he wanted to say that he was donating so much money, he was interrupted by some tan guy and said that he was donating 10 million. Looking at this purple-haired guy, the guy wondered who else it was. Did he sneak in here unnoticed? Someone has already shouted that 10 million, this guy has gone crazy. Someone else said that wasn't it the main manager of the Kang family's medical business, Kang Tianming. Someone else said that since he is Kang Tianming, he is from a rich family. The tan guy looked up and said that before he donated this money, he had one request to Miss. Can she give him a kiss? The girl fell into a stupor from this. And seeing this, Kang Tianming smiled and said that since Miss Qin Ruo Ying is such a kind person, for the sake of charitable donations, she wouldn't dare to refuse, right? Of course, the fans, and especially the old people, were furious. One of them shouted, "What the hell is this? This Kang Tianming wants to kiss their goddess for some pathetic 10 million. Chuckling, Kang Tianming said that it was a charity concert, and looking down at everyone, said that if they had something, then why wouldn't they donate more of it? After these words, everyone immediately fell silent, including the old man. At this time, the guy raised his hand and said that this is his first time in charity, so he is not experienced in this business. Kang Tianming looked in the direction of the guy and he smiled and said that why wouldn't he try to donate 100 million? From such a statement, everyone was shocked, because this is 1 billion. Someone immediately recognized the smug guy. Someone said that this is the billionaire who appeared at their school recently. Someone else said that this billionaire is so amazing. Kang Tianming, enraged, shouted that it didn't matter how much money he donated to show love. Immediately the old men looked at him and said that he dared to say such a thing. He was just pretending himself. But to Kang Tianming's surprise, Ning Tao himself supported him, saying that what Kang Tianming said was true. Money is just property, the most important thing is love. Walking towards the girl, the guy took the girl's hand and said that in the future he would create a charitable foundation. This fund will not be named after him. At that moment the guy took the singer's pen and kissed her and said that the fund would be named after his goddess. From this, even Qin Ruoying blushed and looked at the guy in surprise. The guy was also supported by fans, shouting that it turns out that this billionaire is not only rich, but also loving. Only he is worthy of their goddess. Kang Tianming, enraged, shouted that he was the best fit for Qin Ruoying. All the garbage immediately flew at him and he was told to get out, because there is no place for smelly perverts here. Kang Tianming shouted as he left that only these guys would wait. Grinning, the guy thought to himself that really such trash as this Kang Tianming thinks that he can take his woman. Suddenly someone screamed about a kiss and the guy was shocked. Immediately, everyone supported the loner and began shouting about a kiss. The guy blushed and said that it was not good in public. And then the girl kissed him on the cheek and quietly said that at 9 o'clock in the evening in a small forest behind the school, let him be there or he will lose. The guy completely blushed. He earned 1,000 points and 2 full attributes. At that moment, Xiao Ba appeared above him and shouted into a megaphone that he congratulated user Ning Tao on successfully completing the charity mission. The guy's strength and agility became 14, and his defense was 13, and he also had 10-20 points. Xiao Ba looked at the drooping guy with surprise and asked if he was okay, and asked why he was silent. The guy suddenly raised his head with a red face and shouted that they were waiting for him in a small forest, which scared Xiao Ba pretty much. The guy started dancing like crazy and repeated that the girl called him to a small forest. Xiao Ba, looking at the guy, thought that it looked like he had a kukugan. While Xiao Ba was holding the stupid table on his hand and looking at the guy, he clenched his fists and thought that he needed to calm down. This happens to him for the first time in his life. Everything has to be perfect. He needs to prepare. He has to apply 20 masks, scour everywhere with perfume, and of course do not forget about ensuring safety. Now that he is fully ready, he can move out into the small forest. The moon was shining in the sky and next to the forest there was a sign indicating the forest of lovers. A lonely girl with golden hair was waiting there and soon a guy came up to her and called Miss Qin Ruoying. The girl turned around and asked with a smile that Mr. Ning Tao had finally come. The guy was trembling with nerves and blushing, and raising his hand, he said in a trembling voice that he had come. The guy excitedly said, Miss Qin Ruoying looks great. The girl smiled and thanked him, and then the guy asked her if she had already had dinner. The girl nodded and the guy, not knowing what to do, said in a panic that the weather was good today, there was no rain. The girl smiled and said that this was indeed the case. There was an awkward silence and the guy, even more nervous, thought hard about what the hell he was talking about. The battle hasn't even started yet, and his mind is already empty. Where had all his calmness and casual chic gone? But he's still new to this kind of thing. Of course he was suddenly challenged. How is it possible that he will become a deserter in the first battle? Suddenly he felt the girl's hand and lifting his head saw that she was calling him somewhere. After a while, they were already standing on the branches of a large tree. The guy looked down nervously and thought that it was serious on a tree. There in a tree. Such oddities are common among all celebrities or something. The girl looking down said that if the guy doesn't like it, they can change the situation. The guy waved his hand in a panic and said that he didn't mind, not at all, because it's great here. Then the girl sat down and from this kind of guy's eyes popped out of their sockets. The girl turned around and told him to be gentle with her. In the eyes with hearts and a wide open mouth, the guy told the girl not to worry. He would be the most gentle. Suddenly he crashed into a tree pole, and the girl asked anxiously if he was alright with him. What he was thinking. The guy raised his hand, scratched his head and said he was fine. He was thinking about how to establish this charitable foundation, and for a while he got lost in his thoughts. Although he said it, the guy mentally cursed himself. The girl, delighted, said that Mr. Ning Tao was a really good person, and then bowing, she said that she was sincerely grateful to him. And once again she thanked him for his generous donation. The guy, seeing this, scratching his cheek in embarrassment, asked her about what she said. He should come here just to thank her. She said that there could be bad rumors. She squeezed her eyes shut in embarrassment and said she was really sorry if she had disturbed him. The guy smiled and said that everything was fine, but in his thoughts he was sobbing thinking that his little dream of a forest grove was destroyed. At this time, voices were heard behind them. Someone said he was so jealous of the guy. It was the younger Khan and the blonde one. Smiling maliciously, Han Wan said he really was able to win Qunruo Ying. He must be lucky. The guy looking at Han Wen asked what he wanted blocking the girl at this time. Han Wen handed him the paper, and the guy looked at him in surprise. Han Wen smiled and told the guy to sign this contract, otherwise he would meet his death today. The contract was for the transfer of shares. The guy tore up the contract and threw the sheets down and with a serious face, said that Han Wen could only dream of such a thing. He won't sign this contract. Han Wen, lighting a cigarette, told Mr. Ning to think about it. And then he smiled and said that his uncle and sister were still in the hospital, weren't they? This news made the guy sweat. He thought about what this guy knew. Han Wen grinned and said that now it had come to him. If he didn't sign, then at that moment the guy threw the photos in his hand and said that all his relatives would be dead. In the photos, the guy saw a monkey. Deepeng and Yi Tun Tun and enraged. The guy immediately shouted that he was a bastard and waved his fist. But he immediately got hit on the head with an iron bat. When he fell, they immediately started kicking him. The girl immediately approached the guy and shouted for them to stop. How dare these bastards hit people, she said to call the police. All three of them smiled nastily and said that it was the girl who really said that she would call the police. The guys sarcastically said that they were so scared that they would immediately run away from here. The girl, seeing this behavior, panicked and the guys immediately grabbed her and shouted that she really caught them. Another of the guys asked her why she wouldn't have fun with him. A third said she was truly beautiful. Her skin is so white and smooth. The girl screamed for help. Then the guy got up, told them to stop and added that he would sign the contract. Gritting his teeth, the guy told him to get the contract. Handing the paper to Han Wen, smiling maliciously, he said that he should have agreed earlier. The guy grunted and said that this time they were lucky. But he can't understand one thing. How he knew that the guy was here. Han Wen smiled and said that they had infiltrated a lot of people around the guy. The guy squeezed the handle and asked about the accident and the street fight. Han Wen was behind it all. He nodded, smiling, and said that this was the most effective way. The guy smiled and said that he had made good plans to take his shares. Laughing out loud, Han Wen said that was the point. He was able to pull it all off only thanks to his father's advice. Then the guy handed him the papers and said that here was the contract. He grinned and said that it was not too late. In the paper he saw his drawing and words of gratitude for telling everything. The guy in a rage squeezed the paper and shouted that this guy had deceived him, so he should be killed. His henchman immediately nodded, and the guy called Xiao Ba and said that he needed medical help, to which he said that it was no problem. The guy bought a furious potion and Xiao Ba reported that it was activated. The guy immediately shone and because of this, the bandits blinked and wondered what was going on here, and why he was shining so. The guy smiled and shouted that they would die first. One of the bandits, seeing that an aura was burning around the guy, asked if it was really some kind of cosplay on Bruce Lee. And the second asked if it was a parody of Jackie Chan. One of the guys said he was just bluffing and the other supported a colleague and added that he couldn't do anything to them. The guy opened his palms and, getting ready, began to accumulate energy in his hand. Seeing these bandits, he said that he seemed to have read the comics again. Yes, they will be able to kill him even if he is a Super Saiyan himself. The guy screamed and released a golden ball in his hand that became a laser and pierced everything and cut down trees that got in the way. The laser left nothing of vegetation on the ground, just the soil, and that's it. Also, all the bandits were fried to the crust and lay all crumpled. The guy began to calm down and, closing his eyes, said that it hurt. Is this really a side effect? Xiao Ba looked at him and said that he had released too much energy in one hit. Of course it's hard for his body. The guy asked about where Han Wen was and Xiao Ba pointed in that direction, saying that he was lying over there in complete shock. Han Wen was really shocked and sat on the ground with his mouth wide open. The guy came up to him and called him, which made him shudder. Coming up close, the guy poked him and told him to give him all the evidence of his crimes and his father's crimes, or he would cut off his balls. Han Wen, enraged, shouted to the guy to dream about it. He would not give up his father. The guy grinned and said that it was a touching moment, how faithful he was, but the guy turned on the recording and said that he had already done it. From the recording, Ning Tao's voice was heard asking that someone help the guy, because this plan is quite clever. He laughed and said that yes, his father gave him a couple of tips. The guy spread his hands and said that he gave him a chance. But what a pity. Han Wen immediately realized that he would be in a bad way, shouted at him to wait. He would tell everything. The guy smiled villainously and said it was too late. Han Wen already turned pale, and then his desperate cry rang out in the whole forest. At this time, a monkey and Dao Peng were passing by. Dao Peng, looking towards the forest with pallor, said that he had heard screams in that direction, but the monkey calmed him down and told the guy not to rummage, because it was his toy. After a while, Qin Ruoying ran to the guy along with the police and asked him if he was alright. The guy turned around and saw the girl smiling and said that everything was fine. Now everything is settled. The girl was pretty surprised, asked if he really coped with them himself. The guy pointed towards the tree and then the girl turned around and saw a pale Hanwen with casts. His look was telling someone to kill him. The girl, straightening her hair, said that the guy was amazing. He eliminated everyone himself. The guy lifted his hair up and said complacently that it was nothing. He didn't even use all his strength. Then the girl pressed slightly against him and asked if he could take her home. The guy blushed, and seeing this, the girl continued to speak in a languid voice. She said that when they are at home, she wants to know his true strength. The guy blushed all over, even got up thinking that she was serious. At this time, a dry cough was heard and the officer said that he had been informed about the robbery. The guy saw Captain Zhao and said that it was him again. Is there really only one policeman in the whole city? He was also not very happy about the meeting and asked about why he was always there. The captain asked about where the suspects were and the girl immediately said that of course it wasn't him. She pointed at Han Wang and said that he was the one who wanted to hurt Mr. Ning and her. Han Wen saw the cop, immediately realized that this was his chance and immediately ran in his direction, shouted that he wanted to make a statement. Han Wen immediately shouted that the guy had attacked him and his friends. Clinging to the captain who pushed him away, the guy added that he had inflicted severe damage to his most important place. Almost spitting, the guy shouted that it turned out he had used the power of a manga hero. He must be an alien invading planet Earth. And then Han Wen was grabbed by two officers and he looked indignantly at the captain and said that he was telling the truth. The captain, however, told Tom that he needed help and then ordered his men to lock him up. The guy, looking for something in his pockets, said that he had a gift for Captain Zhao. The captain turned in his direction and the guy handed Han Wen's phone. Then the guy said that the captain would find a lot of interesting things here. The captain, looking at the phone, said that it was the same thing. Ning Tao said goodbye, said that he would leave the captain here, and then the guy went to Qin Ruoying. But suddenly the captain grabbed his hand and the guy asked what the captain was doing. The captain seriously said that he should follow him to the station. There is something very important here. The guy in despair said that he wanted to bring the girl home, but the captain, not listening to him, said that they would reward him for it. The guy almost cried out that he didn't want any reward, he wanted her. The next day at the guy's villa, he woke up yawning and scratching his head, thinking that he had spent the whole night at the police station and had only slept for a few hours. In front of the guy were three of his people, Yi Tong Tong's maid, Gao Lai's lawyer, and an amble named Xiao Hai. The lawyer said, "Sir," that he had finally woken up. The guy staggered from such a greeting and asked about why they were all here. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and said that unless Mr. forgot, there will be a meeting of the board of directors today. The guy smiled and said that how could he forget about this? They all seem motivated. Getting up, the guy said that so be it, they would go to fight, and put on his coat. Today there was a meeting in the company of Jian Yi. As soon as the guy came in, all the girls turned around and saw him. They admired, and also they were wondering if he had a girlfriend. The guy, surrounded on both sides by lawyer Gao Lai and security guard Xiao Hai, walked very confident. Looking at him, the girl thought that he was too perfect. At this time, Xiao Ba grinned and said that people are so interesting. Now that he's rich, everyone loves him. Smiling, Xiao Ba said that when the guy becomes the biggest investor, then he will be loved even more. He will be able to live a luxurious life. The guy said he didn't need it, which surprised Xiao Ba. Becoming serious, the guy said that he did not want to become garbage in the likeness of Han Wen. When Kaianai completely passes to him, he will use his wealth to help society. Xiao Ba looked at the guy in shock, and then grinned and said that these words come from Ning Tao, so they can't be believed at all. Ning Tao, enraged, shouted that he was serious and then someone called him. When he turned around, he saw a dapper blonde man who, pointing at him, said that the guy dared to come here. Now he has found support, so the guy has to prepare for death. Next to him was his girlfriend, who with an evil face said that after today he could become a beggar again. The guy, picking his nose, told them to get out of the way, and his guards threw these two away with one blow. The dandy, lying on the ground, said that he finally got a chance to show off and his girlfriend was crying, saying that she had been beaten up again. Next to the meeting room, the guy stopped and told the guards that here they are. The guy told Gao Lai to give him the file, and added that with him, it alone would be enough. The lawyer became worried and could not connect two words, but he looked hard at the old man and told him to believe in him. Whose husband, he just has to do what the guy said. The lawyer nodded and said that everything would be as the young gentleman wished. As soon as the door opened, bloodthirsty glances from all sides rushed into it. One of them was Han Wen's father. Smiling, the old man said that this brat really came. The old man remembered that he had received a message yesterday saying that Ning Tao wanted to sign a contract in private. Smiling, the old man thought that he didn't know what this guy was planning, but the old man wouldn't let him slip away from him. He has already collected the company's shares. The chief executive is also on his side. Today he was sure to destroy the guy. The guy himself, having come in, smiled at everyone and greeted everyone. But of course no one paid attention to him and he began to be ignored. The guy realized that they were all on his side. It complicated everything. Suddenly, someone stood up and stretched out his hand, said to Mr. Ning Tao that this was their first meeting. The guy looked at the bald man and he smiled and said that his name was Yi Fanjet. If the guy didn't mind, he could sit next to him. It was the first major investor Kyanai. The guy sat down next to the first major investor, and others were sitting in other places, but Han Wen's father was sitting at the head of the table. The first major investor Kyanai smiled and said that they were all gathered here today because a new shareholder had joined them. After that, the man pointed at Ning Tao and said that they were all for his sake to greet him. Ning Tao himself wasn't that happy. With a frown, he looked at the first major investor Kyanai. Other people looked at him either with envy or with anger, clucking to themselves and saying that he was lucky. But today he would come to an end. The first major investor Kyanai stopped the elder Han and told him to stop for a second and say that about this. He needed to say something to Ning Tao. Han King smiled and continued his speech. He started by saying that the guy was nobody just a few days ago, without money and without power. But somehow, he inherited Mr. Tang's shares. After that, suddenly $100 million came into his account. Han King investigated the case and revealed that this bastard had embezzled their company's money. The guy was frowning, but Han King smiled and continued. Someone at that time gave him the material and he took it and said that this was already a crime. If he reports this to the police, the guy's life will be over, but as the eldest he will not bargain because of this. But of course, this is on condition that the guy gives his shares to Han King, and he then spares his life. The first major investor Kyanai looked at Han King and thought with apprehension that he was too ambitious, because Ning Tao's shares were worth more than 10 billion. The old man couldn't afford to deceive this guy, so he clenched his fist with a smile and told President Han that this was a serious accusation. He can't say that without proof. At this time, the guy gloomily reported that it was useless. Ning Tao frowned, said that since President Han King says he embezzled the money, the guy thinks he must have made a perfect plan in advance. In fact, the first major investor Kyanai can save his little tricks, because the guy himself is here to sign the contract and transfer the shares anyway. Han King smiled and said that he was a smart boy, but to the surprise of President Han King, the guy put some documents on the table and said that but he was not going to transfer his shares. On the contrary, President Han King will have to translate his own. President Han King smiled and asked why he had to do it. It would only happen in a guy's dreams. A message from Han Wen came to Han King's phone. It said it was Han King's daddy, Ning Tao. Ning Tao said that he had President Han King's son, so he had to sign the contract. Han King grinned, which he understood now, but then laughed out loud and shouted that it was all interesting, of course, but it was just ridiculous. President Han King slapped the table and said that the guy thinks he's giving up everything for a jerk like his son. Looks like the guy underestimates him. The guy, enraged, shouted to Han King to shut up and showed the phone and shouted that his crimes were here. He kept them. If he hands them over to the police, he's finished. Han King smiled and said that he could do whatever he wanted. But the guy should take into account that then the president will tell them that the guy stole his son's phone and falsified this evidence. There is a crowd of lawyers behind him. No one knows who will end up in prison. The guy frowned at the old man. At this time, the other shareholders smiled maliciously and began to speak one after another. One of them said that President Han King could prove his innocence. The guy turned pale and said that it looks like this guy is tough. If his son is a fool, then Han King is the boss of demons. With cold sweat streaming down his face, the guy thought that he was finished. Han King and the rest of the board members have united against him. He is alone, so what should he do? This is completely out of line with his expectations. At that time, he saw a bald guy opposite, and he was reading something on his phone. The guy thought with expectation, that really this guy. But before Ning Tao could finish the thought, a document was thrown in front of the guy and he looked at him in surprise. President Han King pointed at the guy and told him to stop wasting time and just sign the contract. This is his last chance, or he can't even imagine what will happen to him. Smiling awkwardly, the guy scratched his cheek and said that the transfer of shares is such a big deal, so they should first discuss everything with other board members. But President Han King smiled and said that the guy was really a fool or just pretending. Doesn't he see that all the people here are his people? The guy smiled to Han King's surprise and said that since this was the case, he wanted to show them all something. And this is something very interesting. Taking the phone in his hand, the guy brought out a picture with some girl, and next to the girl was that bald guy. One of the shareholders, a bespectacled man, asked the other if it wasn't his wife in the photo, and he went into a rage pointing at the guy and shouted about how this bastard dared to take a photo of his wife. The guy smiled and said it wasn't him, he found it in Han Wen's phone. From such a turn, President Han King was sweating all over. When he came to, he shouted that the guy thinks that he can quarrel with them. He can only dream about it. The guy smiled and told them to wait a second, because the most exciting part has not yet come. Then he brought up a photo of Han Wen, who was standing with the wife of that fox in his underwear. The bald shareholder, seeing this, flew into a rage, jumped up from his seat and with swollen veins, shouted that it was his wife. Immediately, other shareholders pointed at him and shouted that now this bald puppet. One of them even said that he told him that his wife was an idiot, but he didn't believe it. The guy told everyone not to laugh, because it's for everyone, and started on the button and showed another photo with a girl. One of the shareholders, enraged, shouted that it was his wife. Then there was some cute blonde, and another of the shareholders said that this was his girlfriend and how could she do that. Another photo with a sadistic madam upset another shareholder, and he shouted that it was his daughter-in-law. Was there something going on between him and Han Wen? Suddenly, one of the shareholders said that he wanted to check whether there was anyone's wife or a female family member who was not here at all. Another one said that there didn't seem to be any. Of course, after this, the shareholders, enraged, each shouted about his own. From such pressure, poor President Han King recoiled and turned pale all over. He asked them to wait, it's his son's business, he's not involved in this. Immediately, the shareholders shouted that his son was doing this because Han King is a bad father. They shouted that they would restore justice. Ning Tao sighed with relief and said that this was an unexpected turn. Smiling, the guy looked at the phone and said that this time he really owed Han Wen. The guy looked at the battered president and said that he was ready to sign the contract, because all his people were against him. An old man with a drooping head and tears in his eyes said that he was ready. Then he signed the document and looked at the guy with sadness and said that he signed everything, so the guy shouldn't tell the police anything. Smiling, the guy said that he could be sure the guy was keeping his word. When he returns, he will also release Han Wen. The guy smiled and asked Xiao Ba if he could restore the task of acquiring shares of Han King, which he owns. Xiao Ba said yes, but it would be worth 10 points. The guy smiled and said that he wanted to restore it right away, and Xiao Ba smiled and restored the task. Then a notification popped up that the mission was completed, and then a notification came that the guy had raised the level. President Han King looked at the other shareholders and asked them to spare him, because he now had nothing left. He also promised that he would make his son pay for everything he did. One of the shareholders said that there was no need to be so ruthless now that President Han King had nothing left. At this time, President Han King himself smiled maliciously and thought that they were a bunch of merciful idiots, because with his connections and influence, he would return very soon. Clenching his fists, trembling with rage, the old man looked at Ning Tao, who was shaking hands with the shareholders. Han King thought that he would make everyone know about his decision. At this time, Han Wen appeared in the office with broken teeth and tears and snot. The old man looked at him and was surprised. Han Wen, having fallen incandescent in front of his father, immediately hugged him. The old man looked at his son and said that he thought Ning Tao had caught him. Han Wen shouted that the bastard had turned him into the police. Han King did not have time to understand what was going on. As the captain, the old man Han King asked. The old man turned in the direction of the one calling him, and Captain Zhao showed his identification, said that he was from the police. Then the captain said that Han King was suspected of involvement in several commercial crimes. Therefore, he should not resist and go with them to the police station. Enraged, Han King looked at Ning Tao and said that how could he break the words. The guy spread his hands, said that he had only given Han Wen's phone as evidence. The old man would not be convicted for this. However, if someone confirms his crimes, he is afraid that the old man will go to prison. When Han King was already furious, his son apologized to him and said that he confessed everything, which caused the veins on the old man's face to swell. Trembling, he turned around and slapped his son, shouting that he would kill this nit. While the first major investor, Kyanai, was being held by President Han King, he furiously scolded his son, asking him if he did not support this fool, then why is he so professionally hurting his own father? While the bald first major investor Kyanai was stopped by President Han King. At this time, Han Wen crawled away from his father, thinking that his father had gone mad. He'd better get out of here fast. But then people appeared in front of the guy. One of them, crunching his fingers and smiling maliciously, said that young Mr. Han Wen was very lucky, because he had fun at their house. After a while at the Sun Yun Grand Hotel, 3 glasses clinked glasses, shouting that this is for their health. There were 3 people sitting at the table: Ning Tao, Gao Lai's lawyer, and Bu Gai's security guard. The guy smiled and thanked everyone for today. They defeated the Han family. The black guy said that the guy beat all of them. He's a very smart man. The guy, looking around, said that he did not see Yi Tong Tong. Where did she go? The guard, drinking juice, said that the girl had gone to change clothes to surprise the young gentleman. The guy, surprised and expectantly, began to think about the surprise. At this time, some blonde told a friend with purple hair to look in the direction for 12 o'clock. Her friend said that she had already noticed him. She added that this guy is one of the largest shareholders of Kyanai Corporation. Young, rich and single, that's what you need. The blonde, clenching her fists, smiling, said that as soon as she got him, she would also become a rich lady, and her friend excitedly told her to move, because the hunt had begun. And after a few seconds, the girls from both sides surrounded the surprised guy. The blonde said how about a drink together. The second girl said that she was lonely today, so the guy could brighten up her loneliness. The guy apologized with a crooked smile and said that he was busy now, which is why the blonde approached his face and said that everything was fine. They just had to hurry up then. Suddenly, flower petals flew in their direction and all 3, including the guy, turned towards the new girl. A beautiful girl with pink hair and a beautiful pink dress appeared in front of them. Not only the Trinity with Ning Tao, but all the people of the institution with saucer eyes or heart eyes began to look at the girl. It's the first time they've seen her here. The girl turned to the shocked guy and said that she had arrived at the boss's return. And then, embarrassed, she asked if he liked her in this outfit. Immediately, the blonde and the violet-haired woman, enraged, shouted asking who this girl was and how she dared to destroy their plans. The other girl screamed at the girl to get out of here because she was interfering with them. At this time, the guy pushed these 2 annoyances and got up and took Yi Tong Tong by the hand, which embarrassed her. Ning Tao smiled and looked straight into the girl's eyes and said that he liked her dress very much. But then he added that he liked her much more than the dress. The embarrassed girl called the guy by name, and that's when their lips almost touched. A new girl appeared in the institution. It was the golden-haired beauty Qin Ruo Ying. The guy and the girl recoiled, and the star turned to Ning Tao with a smile. She said she heard the guy was having a party here and she was nearby, so she decided to drop by to congratulate him. The guy looked at Qin Ruo Ying in shock, and the star froze when she saw a pale guy and a beautiful girl who was holding his hands. Pretending to smile, the star fiercely asked about who this girl was. The guy immediately jumped back, scratching his head and turning pale, said that she was just an employee from the office, so Qin Ruo Ying should not understand him correctly. The guy thought to himself that he was screwed. Suddenly, a sad voice rang out, and the guy, sweating all over, looked towards Yi Tong Tong and saw that she was mumbling sadly that she was just a colleague in the guy's heart. The guy immediately became inflamed and shouted that this was not the case and asked Yi Tong Tong to let him explain everything. At that moment, Xiao Ba appeared next to the guy and said that he was a friendly reminder that if Qin Ruo Ying doesn't have feelings for him, then the reward for his assignment will be cancelled. Then, looking at the guy with a squint, Xiao Ba asked about how he knows what will happen in the end. The guy shuddered at this news and he looked at Xiao Ba with a pale and exhausted face. The moon was shining in the sky, but in the Grand Hotel the guy stayed between the hammer and the anvil and shifted his eyes from one girl, Yi Tong Tong, to another, Qin Zhou Ying. The star frowned and asked Yi Tong Tong who she was and why she was with Ning Tao. The girl smiled awkwardly and said that she was his personal maid and they lived together. From such news, of course, Qin Ruo Na was delighted, and she was all inflamed with rage thinking that they lived together, and besides, she is the guy's personal maid. With red eyes and swollen veins, she looked at the guy and he trembled with fright, especially from the look of Xiao Ba. Immediately said that her feelings for him hardly exist. The guy turned pale and thought about his bird. What should he do? He still needs to finish the task, otherwise his youngest will be cut off. Xiao Ba spread her hands and said that he would be able to explain everything, because men's mouths are full of lies. The guy took out a sign and a pen, nodded and asked them to explain everything. And then, going behind Yi Tong Tong, the guy picked up a sign that said that he lives upstairs and they don't sleep together. This pleased Kun Ruoyin. Her feelings immediately lifted and she thought that it was good since he was not in such a relationship with her. A personal maid isn't it the same as just an ordinary maid? Yi Tong Tong averted her gaze and sadly said that she wasn't really that ordinary, she needed to put on a uniform. Immediately, the star imagined Yi Tong Tong dressed in a nurse's uniform, and gritted her teeth and told Ning Tao to come to her. The guy immediately picked up a table where it was written that this was a standard form. Kun Ruoying sighed with relief, thinking that she was surprised anyway. The girl also said that in addition to the form, she gives the guy a special massage, and taking out a book, added that she was not very good at it, but fortunately Ning Tao gave him a book so that she could learn. But this technique was difficult to learn. The book depicted a grandfather with a cart, a snake, and a grandfather with a peach. The guy seeing this came into shock thinking about what the hell this book is still with her. Immediately, Kun Ruoying's feelings fell to the bottom and she looked at the guy with fury, asking if the guy was really so lustful. The guy fell to his knees and immediately took out a sign where he swore all his property that he had done nothing. And then he stood up with cat's eyes and looked at the girl with tears, telling her to trust him. The star believed in the guy a little more and smiled and thought that it looks like the guy is innocent, and this little maid is trying to piss her off. Smiling, she looked at Yi Tong Tong and thought that it was quite interesting, but she would not lose so easily. In turn, Yi Tong Tong was also burning with passion and thought that it looks like Ning Tao really likes this girl, but she still can't give up so easily. The guy, sweating with sweat, thought that the girls were just burning. At that moment, Xiao Ba smiled and said that Kun Ruoying's feelings had returned. The guy, turning pale, said that he thinks that everything has only gotten worse. Suddenly, at that moment, someone stood up on the podium and greeted everyone and apologized for making everyone wait. Then this guy with a bow tie cheerfully said that now everyone can dance. Hearing this, both girls immediately turned to the guy with a twinkle in their eyes. Kun Ruoying, looking discontentedly and haughtily, told the guy to dance together. In turn, Yi Tong Tong gently smiled, bent down slightly, and asked Mr. Ning if he wanted to dance with her. The guy, looking at this situation, crying mentally, shouted for help. The guy immediately came to his senses and told himself to calm down. This is what all playboys have to go through. The more complicated the situation, the faster he needs to calm down. It's like playing Galgame. You make your choice wisely, and you can get your happy ending. Closing his eyes, the guy nodded to himself, convincing himself that this was just a game. It was as if the screen of the Playboy survival game appeared and the guy chose the start, among the start, continue, settings, and exit. Then there was a choice of difficulty and he was asked to choose a difficulty that was convenient for him. The cursor moved to the usual and the guy decided that he would start with the simplest. The download went and now two girls appeared in front of him. A new notification popped up in front of the guy that at the party, both girls invited him to dance, and he needs to make a choice. The guy decided to choose Kun Ruoyi just to make sure of the level of friendship with her. A new notification popped up in front of him, saying that Ning Tao had finally chosen to dance with Kun Ruoyi. Yi Tong Tong got upset and left. She quit her job as a maid. The guy apologized, but to his surprise the game continued, and the frame changed into a rainy night. Then a picture appeared, Yi Tong Tong with a bag in his hands and Ning Tao, who was standing in front of her. The guy asked Yi Tun Tun why she was here, and she said she was bored. Then a new notification popped up saying that the girl had asked Mr. to go with her, but Ning Tao said he couldn't. And then he added that if Kun Ruoying saw them. The frame changed to red and the girl's hand with the bag appeared. And then a new window popped up, where Yi Tong Tong said that she would leave and take it with her in parts. No one will notice it. At this time, Ning Tao from the game asked what she was talking about, what she would take in parts. And then the frame changed for the girl's crazy smile, and his dead look. Then the girl took out a chainsaw and looked at Ning Tao with bloody eyes. And then a new notification popped up saying that the girl said they could be together forever. And then the frame changed to a bad ending. From such a sight, the guy screamed in fright. The guy clutching his head said that it was very gloomy. He could not choose Kun Ruoying. The guy decided to try it first and chose Yi Tun Tun. A new notification popped up saying that they were dancing so happily, and while Kun Ruoying was left alone, feeling sad. Then Kun Ruoying smiled, clapped her hands, and said that these two are a couple created in heaven. The guy looked at Kun Ruoying and apologized and said that next time he would invite her to dance. Kun Ruoying took out a stick from somewhere and said that everything was fine, she was fine. It's just that the guy has to escort her to the golf course. She just has a stick, and the guy has to give her the ball. Ning Tao said that he didn't have a ball, and Qin Zhou Ying smiled and hit him right between his legs, saying that he was right there. Then a new notification popped up, saying that the ball was flying into the sky and disappearing into the boundless space. After the frame changes to Ning Tao and Han Wen, and a new window appears where it says that lost in despair for a while, Ning Tao reconciled with Han Wenbing, and they both created a rap group, and then they became popular. The guy, looking at such an ending, screamed in despair that this would not happen. And suddenly I realized that he had said it out loud, and now both girls were looking at him with strange looks. Yi Tong Tong is surprised, and Qin Ruo Ying is angry. Yi Tong Tong immediately timidly asked that the guy did not want to dance with her, and Qin Ruo Ying shouted in a commanding tone that he should go with her. The guy panicked, said he could explain everything, but the girl screamed at him to make a choice now. The guy, sweating all over, thought that in any scenario he would die. Is there a perfect ending? What should he do? He looked at the girls who were shouting for him to dance with her. The guy, looking away, said that he was choosing, and then he saw the guard drinking juice and immediately approached him and said that he was choosing him. He even put the big guy in his hands, and he did not understand what was happening. Looked at the boss. In the end, Ning Tao danced with his guard until dawn, while the girls watched from the sidelines. The guard that the boss needs will double the bet. The guy, looking at this guy, told him to shut his mouth. That's how the perfect ending came. In the men's room, the guy breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that it was close. He doesn't know how the kings of the harem survive in these girlish games. It's better for him to avoid these two as much as possible, but how can he do it? At that moment, his phone vibrated. He saw a notice saying that he, due to his repeated absence, did not have enough points to qualify for graduation. Therefore, he must continue to attend classes. The guy, after reading this message, shouted in fright that he had forgotten about it, and at that moment Xiao Ba appeared and told him that he really needed to attend classes, even considering how rich he was. The guy looked at the talking sphere in surprise and asked what she meant, that he didn't need to study since he was so rich. Xiao Ba spread her hands and nodded and said that the purpose of education is to earn money, because money is the main priority in this society. The guy said it was bad, which interested Xiao Ba. The guy added that before his mother died, she told him that she wanted him to become a well-educated person. He doesn't want to be an ignorant fool and let his mother down. Xiao Ba looked at the guy with surprise, and he got up, immediately pulled on his pants and shouted that from today onwards, he should work harder. From his sharp rebound, Xiao Ba recoiled and then looked at the guy with regret and told him that he forgot to vibrate his ass. The guy shouted in surprise about why she didn't tell him about it earlier. The next day the weather was clear and the guy came to Jianan University. The guy in the class was looking at English with a dizzy head. Then the math went on, because of which he was completely terrified. And when philosophy began and finished him off, he even expired. Finally the bell rang and the guy threw down the paper with relief and said that it was finally over. The guy was all pale and thought that he was not very good at studying. But what's there? His head is going to explode. Right at this moment, Xiao Ba appeared and asked with a wide smile if her help was needed. The guy nodded suspiciously, looking at her. Immediately, Xiao Ba took out 2 purple and red elixirs, saying that it was an elixir for memory and for acceleration, and all this for only 20 points. The guy happily said that he would take both, and Xiao Ba smiled and thanked him. Suddenly, the guy raised his head high and laughed loudly, saying that now he could become a genius. His classmates recoiled from his wild laughter, and some bespectacled man with slicked back hair asked him not to make noise. And then he said that he was distracting him from his studies. The guy doubtfully said that the couple had not started yet. The bespectacled man squinted and said that every hour of every day was important for him in his studies. This is the only way he can become a real genius. And then the bespectacled man looked arrogantly at the guy, grinned and said that but such a useless fool as Ning Tao would never understand this. From such a statement, the guy slapped the bespectacled man on the table. He shouted, asking the bespectacled man that he thought the guy was useless. Well, then he probably won't be afraid to arrange competitions. This of course surprised the bespectacled man. But the guy smiled arrogantly and said that he was much better at studying than this bespectacled man. Hearing this, the other classmates of the guy immediately started talking. They discussed that the guy wanted to compete with the Master of Knowledge Zhu. They considered it suicide. Just because a guy has a lot of money, he thinks he's so cool. No amount of money can buy knowledge, not to mention the fact that Master Joy takes first place in the exam every year. Of course, the sweating guy also heard these words, but mentally grunting, he thought that they would not look down on him. The bespectacled man grinned and asked Ning Tao that he wanted to compete with him in knowledge. He was probably joking. The guy slammed on the table, said to stop flogging nonsense. He just wants to compete with him. Flashing his glasses, the bespectacled man said that since the guy insists so much, he has no other choice but to agree. After a week, everyone will take a test in class, and they will be able to determine the result based on the performance of this test. Since this is a competition, it will be either a victory or a defeat, and the loser will be punished. He suggested that the loser voluntarily give up his studies. From such a statement of the bespectacled man, the other students were shocked. A classmate said that it clearly means that Ning Tao will lose to Meister Zhu, that there were clashes with Ning Tao. The guy frowned, compressed his lips, and seeing his doubts, the bespectacled man grinned and asked the guy if he was really scared. The guy, startled by such a statement, immediately shouted, enraged that he just had to wait and see the results in a week. After a while, evening came, and in the guy's villa, Ning Tao clutched his head with a pale face and looked at the textbook, thinking that it was all over and he was finished. His brain was not initially ready for this. There are still so many items left. There's only a week left. He can't even keep up with classes, let alone beat the school's smart guy. At that moment, Xiao Ba appeared and, picking at a non-existent nose, indifferently asked about the fact that he was panicking. Then looking up, Xiao Ba said that it could still be solved with. The guy sighed and said that he would not use elixirs to improve memory for anything. Wouldn't that be cheating? The guy said that his mother had taught him since childhood that he should rely only on his own efforts. If he uses the elixirs and the system to cheat, it will be the same as not living up to his mother's hopes. Xiao Ba, enraged, screamed, saying that the guy was a fool. This time, he is lecturing Xiao Ba on principles. If he really loses, he needs to voluntarily drop out of school. If he drops out of school, then his mom will be even more angry at the guy. He should drink the memory elixir faster. From such anger, the guy already recoiled and said that Xiao Ba was right. It should be normal to use it only once. Xiao Ba nodded and said that yes, that's right, because even if it's a hoax, he must win. At this time, Yi Tong Tong appeared with a tray and a cup and asked the guy if young Mr. Ning Tao would like some tea. The guy turned around in surprise and asked her why she was still up so late, to which the girl replied that Mr. Ning Tao was hard to study, and therefore she came to cheer him up. Then the girl asked about his training, and the guy grabbed his head with tears and said that he was not at all one of those who study. The girl smiled and told the guy not to worry. As long as he relies on his own efforts, everything should be fine. He works so hard that the girl believes that the guy can do everything and learn everything. From such a guy blushing, he said that it would definitely be so. The girl kindly smiled and asked about how about she sat with him. She can teach him too. The guy nodded excitedly, and then looked at the charms of the girl and turned pale. Turning away, he told her to wait and forget about it altogether. He doesn't think he will be able to study with a girl next to him all the time. The girl smiled and said that then she wouldn't bother him anymore, so he should continue studying hard. The guy nodded and wished her good night. When the door closed, a red bottle appeared in front of the guy, and looking at him with doubt, the guy swallowed. The sun was shining in the sky, and in the literature class, Ning Tao was exhausted and sighed with sadness. Looking at him, Xiao Ba thought that the guy was a jerk. After all, he has not slept all last week and drank a lot of energy drinks to continue studying. He could have just chosen the easy way, but he decided to rely on his own efforts. This time he would definitely lose. And then an old teacher with strange glasses came into the classroom. Everyone immediately fell silent and silence formed in the classroom. Slamming the textbook on the desk, the teacher said that today they would read Francis Bacon's famous essay on knowledge by sciences. Slapping the ruler on his hand, the old man flashed his glasses, said that those who could not should not blame him, shouted severity. One of the students cursed inwardly, thinking that this essay was too long. How could he remember word for word? The other, cursing everything and everything, thought that it was crazy, like they, college students, and they still need to prepare an essay. It looks like the teacher has lost another game of chess again, which is why he wants to vent all his anger on them. Suddenly someone raised his hand, which surprised the old man. It was the great Master Zhao, and getting up from his seat, he smiled and asked if he could be the first. The teacher nodded with a smile, saying that Zhu Chengdong could show others a good example. Zhu Chengdong coughed dryly and said that science is done for pleasure, for decoration, and for skill. Pleasure is found most in solitude. Hearing Zhu Chengdong's text, the students were at a loss. One of them said that it was no wonder that Zhu Chengdong was a Meister. He actually quoted an entire passage. Someone else, with shock, said it was unbelievable. The teacher was also pleased, and stroking his goatee, said that he could see that Zhu Chengdong had learned the meaning of the essay well. And then he praised the bespectacled man, saying that he was an excellent student. Zhu Chengdong adjusted his glasses and said that he dared not accept this honor from Mr. Meng. "There is someone in this class who can freely read this essay backwards." The surprised teacher asked who it was, and Zhu Chengdong grinned and said it was Ning Tao. And when he heard it, he lost his mind. He was already exhausted, and now he looked like a walking dead man. Looking blankly, he wondered what someone had said about him. It couldn't be. The professor adjusted his glasses in surprise and squinted at Ning Tao and said that he had missed all classes, as it turned out that he was here today. Then, looking at the barely alive Ning Tao, the professor asked if it was true that he could read the essay backwards. But instead of answering, Ning Tao fell asleep, which shocked both his classmates and the professor. The professor's veins swelled with anger, and clenching his teeth, he looked at the guy who missed all his classes and now came to sleep right in front of him. He's about to teach him a lesson. The old man, coming up to the guy, put his ruler on his desk, and burning with rage, he looked at the student and told him that if Ning Tao did not read the essay backwards today, then he would fail in this subject. But Ning Tao, snuffling, grinned and said that he was an idiot, which angered the teacher even more. The professor in a rage shouted for the guy to die and swung the ruler straight towards his head. But the guy was able to grab the ruler with 2 fingers, which surprised the old man. The guy smiled and asked for forgiveness and told the old man that he just took a break to recover, and now he can read. After a while, a voice was heard in the literature class reading an essay backwards, standing right in front of the teacher with glasses. From the fact that the guy recited everything by heart and also backwards in front of Zhu Chengdong twisted his mouth in surprise, the professor himself was shocked. And after a while the guy finished and at the end took a deep breath. Of course, everyone was looking at him with saucer eyes. After all, how is this not possible? After a second, all the students started talking about their own things. They didn't understand what was going on. He actually read everything backwards. He is not only rich, but also talented. This world is really unfair, they thought. The guy looked ahead and grinned and asked the professor, who was standing with his mouth wide open, about whether there was something wrong with his declaration. The professor said with a shiver in his head that both of them, Ning Tao and Zhu Chengdong, had done an excellent job. The professor thought to himself that he had never thought that the guy in front of him could so freely read an essay backwards. Even the professor himself couldn't do that. The guy was looking at the bespectacled man with a grin. Grinning, the guy mentally asked Zhu Chengdong about whether he understood that this was his strength. Zhu Chengdong himself told himself to pull himself together. It's a draw this time, but he will definitely beat this upstart next time. After that, a life and death struggle began. In English, both read the speech with fire. In chemistry, they fought with the help of magic and elixirs, going nose to nose. In law, they became judges and judged each other, not going to give up. In history, both becoming warriors almost cut each other up. Zhu Chengdong told the guy that he bites off more than he can swallow. Someone as mentally retarded as a guy can't beat a genius like him. The guy grinned and said that did he really think so. The bespectacled man grinned irritably and said that before these items become too simple, maybe they will play for real. The guy nodded, smiling, and said that he was ready at any time. Zhu Chengdong pointed at the guy and said that they would have a math test in the afternoon. The guy should get the maximum. Whoever gets a grade lower than necessary will have to run 10 laps around the campus with the inscription on the sign that he is a break. The bespectacled man, having presented this spectacle, laughed angrily, and the guy sweated, thinking that it would be too embarrassing for the loser. Zhu Chengdong, seeing that the guy was scared, grinned and asked him if he was really scared. The guy pointed to himself and grunted, said that he would be scared only in the wet dreams of a bespectacled man. And now he accepts the challenge. In college, inside Ning Tao's class, he solved problems with a smile, thinking that he had enough practice before the exam, so it would be very easy for him to get the highest score. Suddenly he stopped and looked at another task. This last task was too difficult for him, he couldn't solve it. And after a while, a kind fat man with green hair appeared in front of the students and informed the class that the results of the last exam were here. And then, he said that they did a good job. Smiling, the fat man said that almost all the students failed the last question. Only one of them got the highest score, and it was Zhu Chengdong. He smiled with a gloomy aura, said that at last, and then imagined how someone would run around the university with a sucker's sign. Laughing loudly, he shouted that he had won, he was a winner. He beat Ning Tao, he's a loser. Grinning, the bespectacled man took a sign with the inscription sucker and pointing at the guy shouted that Ning Tao had lost. According to their agreement, he has to put on this sign and run around the campus. Hearing this, the fat man, wiping the sweat from his face with a handkerchief, asked that it was a joke after all. They shouldn't take it so seriously. The guy got up from his seat and told the teacher that this was his agreement with Zhu Chengdong, which surprised the fat man. The guy with a serious face said that if he really lost, he should do it. As a university student, he can't take back his words. Turning around, he said that he believed that if he lost, Zhu Chengdong would do the same. Zhu Chengdong chuckled and said that of course he would accept any punishment they agreed on. The guy immediately smiled maliciously and told Zhu Chengdong to carry out the punishment right now. He jumped out of his seat from such a thing. Enraged, the bespectacled man told him to wait, because he got the highest score. Zhu Chengdong didn't lose this time. Ning Tao raised his finger and said that Zhu Chengdong didn't seem to understand, because the one who got the highest score would be a loser. From such a statement, the bespectacled man was at a loss, and the guy explained with a grin, saying that it was because the last question could not be solved. Zhu Chengdong waved his hand and shouted for the guy to calm his pride because there are those who are better than him. But to the surprise of the bespectacled man, Ning Tao was immediately supported by other students, saying that Ning Tao is right, because there are some questions for this assignment. Another student nodded and said that there was definitely something wrong with this assignment. The teacher picked up the paper and told everyone to wait a second, he would check it now. And 10 minutes later, the teacher said that one of the conditions of the task is incorrect. From this, the bespectacled man was stunned with shock. The guy grinned at the bespectacled man and asked how he could know the answer if the task itself was incorrect. Since he found out the answer to this task, the bespectacled man, sweating all over, adjusted his glasses and said that maybe he was a genius. Immediately the damned came in his direction. Someone cursed this deceiver. Someone asked him what he thought the other students were so stupid, but he just proved that he was a real bastard himself. He has to get out of the university. Suddenly there was a question about who said this, and immediately a handsome man in a tuxedo and black glasses appeared. The teacher greeted Professor Cheng with a smile and asked why he was here, and he adjusted his glasses and said that it was nothing serious. He was just passing by. Immediately, Zhu Chengdong happily clenched his fists and greeted his uncle, which caused Ning Tao to be shocked. Zhu Chengdong immediately pointed at Ning Tao and shouted to his uncle that this was the Ning Tao he had spoken about earlier. He was often late and also slandered Zhu Chengdong in exams. Professor Cheng stopped his nephew with his hand, said that he himself knows well how things are. Then moving his gaze, Professor Cheng said that he knows what to do with the guy. Ning Tao, looking at the professor's gaze, already shrank. Chen Boss Yu, all the students will tremble just hearing his name. They say that he served in a special squad for several years and received the nickname the Devil in a Suit. The guy looked at this professor and thought that who would have thought that this demon was Uncle Zhu Chengdong. He probably gave the answers to the questions before Zhu Chengdong's exam. If that's the case, then everything becomes easier. Then Professor Cheng said that Zhu Chengdong told him that he was often absent. It's true. The guy bowed and nodded, and Professor Cheng frowned and said that then the guy should know that he shouted that he could be expelled. Looking away, the guy guiltily said that he knew. At this time, Zhu Chengdong, looking at the guy, was laughing inwardly, thinking that this time Ning Tao had screwed up. This time his uncle will kick the guy out of uni. Professor Cheng continued, saying that now, on behalf of the faculty, given the violations of discipline, Professor Cheng announces that the guy will not be expelled. This revelation was unexpected news for the guy, and he looked at the professor in surprise. Surprised by this turn, the guy wondered what was going on here at all. Professor Cheng went on to say that he had heard what their teacher had said. Last week, the guy attended all the couples and worked hard. He also passed all the exams well, and his performance was just perfect. During his monologue, Professor Cheng adjusted his glasses, and the surprised guy asked him that he should not be excluded in this way, and Professor Cheng said that he was, but he should not be too proud of it. Professor Cheng smiled and said that he should continue to work hard. The guy even blushed and said that it would be so, but he also thought to himself that this professor looks so cute, does not look like a devil at all. At that moment, Zhu Chengdong shouted for them to wait, and then shouted towards his uncle that he couldn't just let Ning Tao go. He kept shouting that Professor Cheng should have made him pay. Professor Cheng clenched his fist, said that it was true, he did not do it, and the bespectacled man happily said that he would do it now. But in response he received only a fist in the face. Professor Cheng's rage tore his suit, revealing his muscular body. Zhu Chengdong was thrown into the wall, and seeing this, all the students turned pale and everyone was in shock. The teacher was also no exception, but Ning Tao with a pale face thought that he seemed to have jumped to conclusions. This professor is really a demon. Zhu Chengdong clutched at the pile with a pitiful look, asked her uncle why he did that. Professor Cheng, on hearing this question, said that it was as if Zhu Chengdong himself did not know why. Professor Cheng flew into a rage and said that he was aware that Zhu Chengdong was using his computer to get answers. He wonders how their family could have raised a cheater like Zhu Chengdong. Clenching his teeth and looking at the guy with contempt, the professor said that today he would punish Xu Chengdong according to all the rules of their family. The bespectacled man turned pale and shouted that this could not be. Ning Tao breathed a sigh of relief as he walked out, thinking that it was damn frightening. Fortunately, he has been visiting couples lately, otherwise he would have received punishment. At that moment, the guy heard the call and picked up the phone and saw a message from some Tong Menglin. She reported that a meeting of classmates would happen at the Sun Yun Hotel at 8 p.m. He should be there. Evening came and the lanterns of the houses lit up. At the Sun Yun Hotel, a classmate of Ning Tao was standing in the hallway with a glass in which there was a drink. At this time, a girl came up to him and said that he had been hanging around for several hours. Was there really something so fascinating on the street? This was also Ning Tao's classmate, Lai Fan. The girl had brown hair and was dressed in a beautiful red night dress. Zhang Liang looked at his classmate and said that there was nothing there. Then Lai Fan clung to his hand and smiled and told the guy not to lie to her. He was waiting for someone. Then the girl looked at Zhang Liang with mischief and said that it was he who called Tong Menglin to invite Ning Tao. Right. Really, Zhang Liang still can't forget about that. The guy looked at the window and remembered that the blue-haired girl refused him, saying that she liked Ning Tao and not him, Zhang Liang. Clenching his hands, the guy broke the glass, and clenching his teeth, the guy thought about how she could be with Ning Tao and not with him. Only this Ning Tao will wait. Zhang Liang will make him pay, shouted everything. At this time on the street of the city, the guy clutching his heart screamed with beads of sweat on his face, thinking about why he was so nervous. The guy scratched his head and remembered Tong Menglin, who was the most beautiful girl in high school. He didn't even dare to speak to her. Even when they graduated, he couldn't tell her that he liked her. Immediately, a realization came to the guy. Now everything was different. He was no longer a poor and weak boy. This time, he would definitely propose to her. Thinking about this, the guy ran down the street. And then seeing a friend, I wanted to stop, but the guy wanted to stop, but he didn't have time, and the girl bumped into his pile and forced him to spit blood. While the guy sat down from the pain, the girl looked at him in surprise and asked if he was okay. The guy nodded, and then seeing the beauty with blue hair, asked that she was Tong Menglin. The girl also recognized Ning Tao, and the guy was embarrassed by this and scratched his head. At this time, thinking that the girl has become more beautiful, Tong Menglin smiled and said that she almost didn't recognize him. The guy said that she looked great today. The girl in response asked about how the guy has been doing lately, to which he replied that everything is fine with him. The girl laughed sweetly, blushing slightly, and the guy awkwardly asked her why she was laughing, to which she squeezed her fist to her chest and said that she just remembered how they met. The guy remembered that time and realized that when they first met, she bumped into him. The guy was surprised to think that this cute girl would remember that time. The guy smiled and said that he remembered how they ate her bento. He also remembered that he wanted to tell her something. Then the guy got serious, which made the girl embarrassed, tilted her head and began to play with her fingers, asking what he wanted to say. The guy raised his head, said that to be honest, and then the door crashed into him, and Ginger came out and smiled and asked Tong Menglin who she was talking to, and the girl looked awkwardly in the direction of Ning Tao. The girl excitedly ran towards Ning Tao and asked if he was okay, to which he replied with difficulty and a dizzy head that everything was fine with him. Zhang Liang asked with a grin that this was Ning Tao. The stars were shining in the courtyard inside the hotel. In one of the rooms, Zhang Liang told his friends to look at whom he had brought. And he brought Ning Tao and Tong Menglin. Several people were sitting in front of the table. Lai Fan, a guy with a bald head, a guy with blue hair, and a blonde guy. The guy with the bald head asked the guy where he got the suit, for rent or something. And the guy with the blue hair grinned and said that he thought that the guy couldn't even afford to rent such a suit. He must have borrowed it. The guy turned a little pale and thought that shouldn't this be a party for classmates? Then why are all 6 of Zhang Liang here? Looking suspiciously at Zhang Liang, the guy thought about what this Ginger was up to. The blonde grabbed the guy and shouted shoulder, smiling, told him to sit down here, and Tong Menglin shouted, took Lai Fan's hand and told her to come here. The blonde man told Ning Tao to look at these luxurious dishes, but the table had everything from soup to red crayfish, various dishes and various snacks. Zhang Liang smiled and said that these were just ordinary dishes. He didn't know if Ning Tao would like them. The same one looked at the dishes either with surprise or suspicion. At this time, the bald man grinned and told him that the guy could not choose, since he had never tried anything like this before. Wasn't he right? Ning Tao, realizing that they all want to humiliate him, became bitter. Tong Menglin, seeing such an appeal to Ning Tao, shouted in their direction, saying that they had come to the reunion. Then why are they so mean to Ning Tao? Lai Fan stroked her chin and said that Tong Manglin was too vulnerable. Besides, Ai Jiang did not mention Ning Tao's name. The bald man grinned and nodded, saying that Lai Fan had a thing to say. He didn't say it was Ning Tao, did he? Tong Mangling is just screwing things up for himself. When the girl wanted to yell at Ai Jiang, the guy told her that everything was fine, which made her look in surprise in the direction of Ning Tao. Ning Tao smiled and said that it was just a joke, so she shouldn't worry about herself. The guy was thinking that he couldn't let Tong Manglin get into trouble, and he can take care of this garbage himself. Suddenly, at this moment, Zhang Liang got into the conversation, who said that although it was a joke, it was too much. Zhang Liang smiled and added that he wanted to apologize to Ning Tao on behalf of AI Giant. As an apology, he can order the guy the best Australian lobster worth 10,000 yuan. The guy smiled and said that actually even his dog wouldn't eat such a low-grade lobster. From such a statement, everyone fell into silence, and a second later, everyone in the room burst out laughing. The blonde man pointed at the guy and shouted that he thinks this lobster is low-grade. The second was Lai Fan, who also asked, laughing loudly, that he said that even his dog would not eat such a thing, and his family can afford such a dog. Ai Jiang was the last and, laughing loudly, said that he was dying of laughter. There are only his classmates here, who he is trying to give himself away. Does he not want to think about who he was before, or does he think that something changed when he entered the university? Can it really make him a billionaire? The guy just bowed his head gloomy and remembered his childhood, where they also laughed at him, saying that all his clothes were torn or calling him poor and telling him not to come to school. The guy, even more gloomy, slapped the table and called the waitress. At that moment, a waitress appeared in Chinese kipao and asked the guy what he needed, and the guy screamed, asking who ordered such low-quality dishes. Let her get rid of them. He will make the order himself. Turning around, he smiled and said that he was treating. The blonde man looked at the guy in surprise and asked about what Ning Tao really treats. Did he really get rich? Ai Jiang chuckled and said that it looks like the blonde is stupid. How is it possible at all? He just bit off more than he can digest. At this time, Zhang Liang was grinning all over his mouth, thinking that this guy really still wants to destroy his position. He couldn't wait to see when the end would come. The guy at the same time called the new menu to the waitress. The girl smiled and thanked Mr. Nina and said that his dishes would be served soon, and the guy nodded. At that moment, Tong Manglin got up from her seat and asked to wait a minute, and then she said she had to tell the guy something. After a while they came out of that room and the girl screamed at the guy asking what he was thinking. It's not easy for him to earn so much money. He shouldn't argue with them and spend all his money. The guy awkwardly scratched his head and said that Tong Manglin misunderstood him. But the girl did not finish listening to him, approached him, and told him not to do it, please. She knows what the guy is trying to prove to them, but he doesn't have to prove anything to them. The guy looked at such a Tong Mangling smiling and thought that he needed to forget about it. He should not worry Tong Mangling. This time he would spare Zhang Liang. The guy told the girl that so be it, he would obey her, and the girl smiled and said that then they should return. After a while, the guy came back and reported that he was joking about another order, and the girl supported him, saying that he was joking. Of course, the grins immediately followed. The blonde man grinned and said that, as expected, he was only pretending to be rich. Ai Jiang also said that this is for sure, they know who he is. The bald man wanted Zhang Liang to confirm this, but he froze when he saw Zhang Liang burning with the fire of rage and looking with bloody eyes. Zhang Liang, looking at these two, thought that it was ridiculous. They were behaving like lovebirds in front of him. That bastard Ning Tao really doesn't understand that he's some kind of loser. The waitress asked about this menu, and the guy awkwardly apologized and told them to cancel everything. But at that moment, Zhang Liang suddenly shouted for them to wait. Then, with a gloomy look, the guy said that since Ning Tao could not afford it, he would pay for everything. The guy looked at this jerk with a twisted face. The guy thought he could let him go this time, but he's trying so hard to get into trouble. To the surprised guys, Zhang Liang got up from his seat and said that he also wanted to announce something here. Then Ginger went up to Tong Manglin, opened the gift and showed the ring, asked Tong Manglin to come out, shouted at him. The guy looked at the ring stunned. Ning Tao, looking at this, thought that a drama had been staged here. How could he have just proposed to Tong Mangling? Immediately, happy voices were heard in the office. Someone said that it looks like Brother Zhang is a romantic. Tong Manglin will definitely say yes. Someone else said that this is so because Zhang Liang is rich, handsome, and even romantic. Whatever girl doesn't want to be with him? Tong Mangling looked doubtfully to the side while voices were heard from everywhere for her to say yes. At that moment, Zhang Liang chuckled and said that he knew that Ning Tao liked Tong Manglin at school. He smiled and said that as soon as she became his girlfriend, he would arrange for Ning Tao to join his company. He will receive a high salary, 50,000 yuan per month, and will be a senior cleaner in his company. The guy frowned when he heard this, and the others guffawed. Ai Jiang, laughing loudly, shouted that it was very suitable for Ning Tao, and the blonde man said that for Ning Tao, probably 50,000 is a lot. Lai Fan also asked the guy what he was waiting for. He should quickly thank brother Zhang Liang. At that moment, Tong Mengling nodded and told Zhang Liang to give his ring, and he, delighted, asked if she really agreed. Then he would put the ring on her finger. But the girl threw away the diamond ring with a wave of her hand. Then she said that Zhang Liang once in high school, she already told him, and now she can say it again. The man she loves is Ning Tao, so he should just give up. Zhang Liang looked at the ground with a gloomy face, and everyone fell silent. At this time, the guy looked at the girl in surprise, thinking about whether he had dreamed it, or Tong Menglin was serious, said now that she loved him. From the realization of this, the guy all smiled and blushed. Zhang Liang apologized and said that it was probably too sudden. But then, putting his hand on his heart, he said that he really liked her. With his current status and wealth, he would definitely be able to make her happy. Wouldn't she give him such an opportunity? At this time, Ai Jiang nodded and frowned, saying that if he were her, he would definitely agree without any doubts. Lai Fan chuckled and said that Zhang Liang was 100 times better than Ning Tao. But Tong Mengling was unwavering and said that she never thought so, because Ning Tao is still better than Zhang Liang. When they were in high school, the guy had an excellent academic record. Besides, a wealthy family was standing behind him, so a couple of girls were in love with Zhang Liang. She wasn't trying to suck up to him like everyone else, but she was always talking to Ning Tao, the one he despised the most. Since then, Zhang Liang started humiliating Ning Tao and pestering Tong Mengling to be with him. Zhang Liang was just chasing a girl, not because he liked her. He also lied to her, saying that it was a reunion. In fact, he just wanted to make fun of Ning Tao. Zhang Liang's eyes were bloodshot from all this. But the girl, despite this, continued, saying that he was really stupid. The guy barely restrained himself, his veins even swelled, and his hands trembled with rage, and he gnashed his teeth, told the girl to shut up. But before the hand hit the girl, another hand grabbed him. It was the hand of a gloomy Ning Tao. With a gloomy look, the guy said that Zhang Liang would just try to touch Tong Mengling and he would be finished. Zhang Liang clenched his teeth and thought that he was in pain, and then wondered when this guy became so strong. Suddenly someone kicked open the door to their room and both guys turned around. Then a dandy came in and gloomily said that what kind of fool dared to take his box. The waitress, panicking, told young Mr. Lai that he could not come in because there were other guests inside. The dandy in anger shouted that the waitress slammed. Didn't she know that this was his favorite room? Then Zhang Liang appeared and with an ingratiating smile, he asked what brought Mr. Lai to their establishment. The dandy looked at him with contempt and asked who else he was. He didn't know him. Zhang Liang said that he was once lucky enough to have dinner with Mr. Lai's father. The dandy pointed at Zhang Liang and said that his father wanted to invest in him. He has to hurry up and get his people out of here. He needs this hall. Zhang Liang awkwardly said that but he had a meeting of classmates here. The blonde man grinned and said that since he didn't want to get out, then he would call his father to tell him not to invest in this Zhang Liang. Zhang Liang panicked and immediately told him not to do that, they would leave right away. The dandy turned around and saw Tong Menglin and with the eyes of hearts, thought that she was a beauty. His girlfriend Lily can't even compare to this lady. The dandy immediately approached the girl and asked if she wanted to watch a movie at his 800-meter villa. At that moment, someone put a hand on his shoulder, and the dandy wanted to scream, but opened his eyes when he saw Ning Tao. Ning Tao smiled villainously and asked Lai Chan that he was a tough guy. The dandy was immediately shocked to see an old acquaintance. Paling, the dandy thought about how it happened that Ning Tao was here. Now he is alone at the head of the company. He can crush him like a fly. What should he do? Zhang Liang immediately appeared in front of the dandy and shouted that Ning Tao did not try to insult his friend. Smiling contemptuously, the guy asked Zhang Liang who it was that shouted such a friend. The guy grinned and said that the guy would be scared to death, and then introduced the dandy, saying that he was one of the shareholders of the Kyanai Corporation, his investor and his best friend Lai Tian. The dandy, on the other hand, frowned all over from such a performance and was mute. Ai Jiang immediately said with admiration about the Kyanai Corporation, because it is the largest consortium in China. Lai Fan, on the other hand, looked at the dandy in love, saying that he was worthy of this name. Rich and handsome. Zhang Liang smiled, raised his thumb and told his brother Lai not to worry, because as long as he, Zhang Liang, is here, this poor kid will not touch him. But Zhang Liang received only a blow to the jaw, from which he flew away from everyone and crashed into the ground. Sullenly, the dandy said that when it was him, Lai Tian became his best friend. The guy, looking at the dandy, wondered what had happened to him, because today he felt that Lai Tian's aura was strong today. At this time, the dandy turned around and looked at the prince, and then in an instant used the transformation and immediately bowed down in front of the guy, greeting him as His Highness. Then he informed without getting up that the villain had just slandered His Highness, so let the guy teach him a lesson. The guy looking at this show wondered what it was all about, but others were shocked by such a show, asking when Ning Tao became emperor. While the guy was looking at the dandy, wondering where this eunuch's clothes came from, he bowed to the guy Tong Menglin and said that it must be the empress. Then he apologized to her, shouted that he had offended her just now. Immediately, Zhang Liang stood up and shouted that his brother Lai should wait, because Ning Tao is not the emperor. He's just his poor classmate. The dandy frowned and said that since Zhang Liang thinks this guy is poor, then what are his eyes for? Then he asked him to introduce who Ning Tao really was. Taking out the imperial robes, he said that he was a major shareholder of the Kyanai Corporation. The dandy continued, saying that Ning Tao is young, promising, handsome and very rich. Of course, all of Ning Tao's classmates were shocked when they found out that he was the second major shareholder of the Kyanai Corporation. Zhang Liang, not believing it, pointed at the guy and said that it was all nonsense and a lie. How can a poor man like him be Kyanai's second big investor? It's impossible. He couldn't believe it even if he was killed. The dandy, or rather already a eunuch, having become enraged, shouted to Zhang Liang to close his mouth. How can he peck at his emperor? Whether to believe Zhang Liang or not, he will kill him now. Ning Tao coughed and told Lai Tian to stop. The guy looking at him said that in any case Zhang Liang is his classmate. How can he apply Mila to him? The dandy bowed and told His Highness that he had a kind heart. But when the guy told him to just confiscate Zhang Liang's house, the servant was shocked. The guy looked at the dandy with a frown, said that he should take his house, which is unclear from this. He was scared, immediately said that he would do as His Highness ordered. Zhang Liang, hearing their dialogue, grinned and asked about how he would take his house. Does the guy consider himself an emperor? Lai Fan immediately said that this was not some kind of TV drama. Suddenly, Zhang Liang's phone rang and everyone jumped. Zhang Liang picked up the phone and seeing him, AI Zhang asked Mr. Zhang, so that he would not say that his house was taken away from him. But the blonde asked him to say something. Zhang Liang shouted in despair that he was bankrupt. Everyone was shocked and AI Zhang said that it couldn't be, just from one word of Ning Tao. It can't be that Zhang Liang has gone bankrupt. All the classmates looked at Ning Tao picking his nose indifferently and asked that Ning Tao was really the second major shareholder of Kyanai Corporation. Immediately, all classmates clung to the guy, introducing themselves to him. The girl said that Ning Tao's brother was getting more and more beautiful, and another girl said that she missed him. Suddenly, an angry shout rang out and everyone looked to the side and saw Zhang Liang, who was furious. He said that he wouldn't let Ning Tao go so easily. Immediately, Lai Tian shouted to the guards that there was a murderer, and they had to protect His Highness. After a while, Zhang Liang fell to his knees on the floor in traditional female attire, and shouted for His Highness to forgive him. The guy looking at this farce thought that he had just got into some kind of drama in a harem or something. Zhang Liang raised his face and shouted that he was wrong and that he should not have offended the empress. He shouldn't have treated His Highness so disrespectfully. Then at the end the guy screamed that he deserved to die. But then Zhang Liang, or already this lady, screamed that she had served His Highness for many years and therefore she begged to be spared. The guy, looking at him with an unreadable expression, mentally thought about when he had been serving him. The guy took off the crown with displeasure and said that it was enough for the emperor. Straightening his tie, the guy said that from now on their grievances would be forgotten, but he should no longer catch his eye. Zhang Liang said with an ingratiating smile that they were old classmates, and he hoped that he could make him rich. The dandy also joined Zhang Liang and said that he also hoped that the guy would take care of him in the future. The guy went into a rage and shouted that they were both lost. And then he turned to his classmates and yelled at them. Immediately, everyone began to leave and soon only two remained in the office, a guy and a girl. Tong Menglin smiled awkwardly and said that everyone had left and she probably had to come back too. The guy asked her to wait, because he had something to tell her. The guy smiled and asked if what she said earlier was true. The girl asked what he was talking about, and then remembered the awkward moment when she confessed that she loved Ning Tao. The girl, remembering that moment, immediately became confused and trembling said that she did not mean it. Playing with her fingers, the girl said that then she was just angry, in any case she. The guy grabbed the blushing girl, screamed her hands and smiled and said that he had nothing, so he never dared to tell her just one sentence. Now he had the courage. The girl blushed all over, and when the guy wanted to confess, she pushed him away and screamed that she was not mentally ready yet. Having said that, she ran away and the guy asked her where she was going. After a while, on different streets, the guy was looking for Tong Meng Lin, but he didn't find anyone. Walking down the alley, he thought about how she disappeared in the blink of an eye. Where did she go? Suddenly, he heard a shout telling him not to approach her. The guy recognized Tong Meng Lin's voice and immediately ran in that direction. At this time, in a dark alley, the girl, walking back, told someone not to approach. If this guy comes closer, she will call for help. There were some 3 bandits against her. The first one with red hair told his sister not to worry because they are not bad guys. Smiling perversely, the guy told her to play with her brother. The girl pushing him away screamed for help, but the redhead laughed and said that she could scream as much as she wanted. No one would come anyway, even if she broke her voice. And after these words of his, he got right in the face and flew off to the side. Smiling, Ning Tao got into a fighting pose and told this grandpa that he was here. Then the guy turned around and asked Tong Meng Lin if she was okay. The girl smiled and said that everything was fine with her. Fortunately, he came on time. The redhead, getting up, said that he dared to spoil the good things of this uncle, and taking out a knife, the redhead said that it looked like the guy was tired of living. The girl anxiously shouted for the guy to run, because the enemy has a knife, but Ning Tao, taking off his jacket, asked about that. So what? It's just a bunch of suckers. He only needs to snap his fingers twice to solve them. Immediately, a knife flew at the guy and the redhead shouted so that the guy did not underestimate the suckers. The guy looked at the yellow blade and thought that the knife has energy. The guy was able to jump away from the trajectory of the blow, but he thought with concern that this blow cut an entire wall. This little bastard is definitely not an ordinary person. Suddenly, the redhead had an epiphany and looking ahead, he said that it looked like Ning Tao was not an ordinary person, to which his partner told the boss that the guy dodged his blow. The redhead, all inflamed, shouted that he needed to get rid of this guy. After his words, he immediately rushed to the guy. Ning Tao grabbed the girl and screamed her hand, shouting that they should run. The redhead with an angry growl said that none of them would be able to escape today and began to accumulate energy in the knife. And then with a flash of light there was an explosion and a mark appeared on the ground from the blow of the redhead, and he asked suspiciously what it was all about. Turning, the bandit saw a crumpled guy on the side from whom steam was coming with a girl in his hand. The guy grinned and said that the redhead was too slow to get rid of him. On the ground was the elixir of speed. Ning Tao carefully placed Tong Meng Ling on the ground and stood up against the redhead. The redhead smiled and said that he was able to avoid his 3-second stab twice in a row. It looks like the guy's speed is not bad. The guy said that it wasn't him who was fast, and then added with a grin that it was the redhead who was slow. The red-haired man's veins swelled from such treatment of him, and he clenched his teeth and said that this guy dared to call him slow. And then with a jerk he went to the guy and said that he was the fastest in Sun Yun City. The redhead waved the knife and noticed that the guy had disappeared and was shocked by it. A figure appeared behind him and the redhead froze, but then, coming to his senses, he turned and swung his sword, but the guy disappeared again. From this, the redhead flew into a rage and began to cut faster and faster, shouting that he would cut this upstart into small pieces. First dancing, then with boredom, and then generally eating ramen. The guy easily dodged all the energy blows of the redhead. And so the guy hit a bowl full of soup right in the face of the redhead, and he stopped and grabbed his eyes, screaming at the top of his voice. The guy grinned and apologized and said that what he ate was very spicy. The redhead with tears in his eyes said that this bastard dared to mock him just like that. Taking the knife back, he shouted, with a wave, so that his brothers would show together with him what speed they had. All 3 attacked the guy with knives at the ready, but he only grinned and said that they did not know what real speed was. Immediately, the guy with the guy all froze and he appeared next to the redhead, and putting his hand on his shoulder, he began to pick his nose, thinking that he could do whatever he wanted. After that, he began to wipe the red-haired man's face with his finger, telling him to let him wipe his booger from his nose on his face. Then the guy replaced the redhead's knife with a cactus. Then he put the brothers closer, and then, with an evil grin, he began to adjust the angle of their hands so that they kept the cactus well where it was needed. After he finished with these 2, the guy started the 3rd one and said that this guy didn't need a cactus, a metal pipe would be perfect. After the guy adjusted the height and angle of the pipe, he took out a stone as a surprise and put it over the head of the 3rd. After all the manipulations, he snapped his fingers, and then the lips of 2 met, as well as their hands crashed into their groin. And also the pipe of the 3rd crashed where it was needed, and the stone fell right into his head. And soon all 3 bandits were lying on the ground, the 3rd giving up the ghost, and the 2 grabbing screamed groin. The guy grinned and said the truth to these three acrobat brothers, namely, if they are men, then it's better for them to slow down. After a while, Tong Menglin woke up and seeing this immediately ran up to her and grabbed her screaming hand, asked if she was okay. The girl looked away in embarrassment and said that everything was fine with her. Then she added that it was good that Ning Tao showed up on time. Otherwise she would have. The guy also blushed, and then seriously told the girl that he had liked her for a long time. The girl, all red, asked what he was talking about, and then, embarrassed, took her head away and playing with her fingers, said that he started talking about it so suddenly she wasn't ready to hear it. The guy, too, blushing, looked away and said that in general he liked her for a long time and he hoped that she would give him a chance. The girl smiled sweetly and asked how he could admit so bluntly, at least they should first get to know each other better. The guy asked that they should get to know each other, and then with a twinkle in his eyes said that he understood. Then taking the girl screamed her hands. The guy said that he would take her to where she would understand what a guy was like in his youth. The moon was shining in the sky, and the city was full of its lights. In the city prison, Sun Yun screamed. A father and son from the Han family were sitting behind bars. Han Wen told his father that he said that a mysterious organization was saving them today, and whether they were reliable. Han King grinned and said that of course they are reliable. This organization is very unusual. Some of its members can breathe fire, some can control water, and some have super powerful, and some even invulnerable bodies. The old man said they were like supermen. Since they have taken up the shouting case, then father and son Han will definitely be able to get out of here. Han Wen, looking suspiciously at his father, asked that they have the gift of clairvoyance and the ability to be invisible. The surprised old man asked his son how he found out about it. He didn't seem to have told him about it. The irritated Han Wen's veins swelled and shouted that because he had seen it before in comics, and his father was a fool to believe in such a thing. Han King became enraged and shouted at his son, saying that he was an ungrateful son. If it wasn't for him, how would they have ended up in this situation? Grabbing each other's hair, they started fighting, and Han Wen said that if his father had not ordered him to deal with Ning Tao, how would the police have caught him? The son said that his father was evil and his father blamed his son for everything. Suddenly, they both heard the sound of heels and Han Wen said that someone was coming here. Han King assumed that it was a security guard, but the girl said that the target should be here in the cage. The father and son immediately laid down in bed. Han Wen said that the guard would be angry if he saw that they were awake, and Han King said that he did not see him. If he catches someone, then let him take his son. Then the girl smiled and said that they were two idiots. Immediately, shouts rang out in the cage and surprised Han Wen, and Han King asked that they could fly. Then the girl told them to stop shouting, and then Han King raised his head and saw a charming girl who said that all the people in this prison had passed out. A prisoner was sleeping in the toilet and a guard was sleeping in some corner. In the observation room, the observer was sleeping. Han King laughed and said that it turns out he hired her to save them. Han Wen gave his father a thumbs up and said he was cool. The old man smiled and said that of course it was. And then the girl asked them that who said that she was here to save them. She came here to take one thing from them. Han Wen snuggled up and said that it was disgusting. In fact, she wanted to take his virginity.